All right, I think we're live, guys. I think we're live. What up? What up? What up, everybody? What's going on? What's going on? So, welcome to another show. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button. What's up to everybody on YouTube? What is up to everybody on Rumble? Make sure you hit that thumbs up, just like the people on YouTube should hit that like button because we're live and we want more people to see it because shit's getting real. Things are going down. I got some news articles for you guys tonight and a bit of a slideshow. Now, I have some more information on the FBI and the, uh, I guess, the national security. What's Tulsi Gabbard over? Is she the director of national security, the DNI? Because the FBI is kind of at odds with Tulsi Gabbard and her people now over the Charlie Kirk case. And I have some more. I made mention of it on the last show, but I have some more details about it on this show, faces and names. So we're going to look into that and speculate on that a little bit more. We also got some news about Trump's plan for the EBT shut off, the EBT crisis. Hence tonight's topic, EBT crisis possibly averted. Trump officials go under military protection and more. So the other bit of news is that there's several heads of agencies within Trump's cabinet that have moved out of their homes and out of their private homes and moved onto a military base in DC. And the reason for that is citing safety concerns. Now, aside from that, we've also seen a bunch of high level, high profile arrests being made and indictments coming down and charges being filed. And now what do you have? Trump not only that, the arrests, but we also have the war on the cartels that's happening in the in South America with Operation Southcom. And so with all that, now we have Trump's cabinet members moving on to a military base and going under basically military protection. And this takes me back to what Q said. Military is the only way because the president has, as the commander in chief, has direct control over the military. So there is no red tape between Trump and the movement of the soldiers, the movement of the units, the deployments, the operation, the conducting of the operations, and so on. Because unlike the civilian agencies where it's extremely politicized, the military is much, much different. And they tend to be more fiercely loyal to whoever the president is and whatever the orders are, regardless of how they may personally feel about that president. And that's partly because the rules of that organization, the United States military, is to pledge your loyalty to the United States of America, follow the orders given to you by the commander in chief, and if you don't, you'll be severely punished. Not severely punished as in 1,000 lashes or anything like that, but you can face being kicked out, losing your benefits, losing your salary, being put in being court-martialed and put in jail. All kinds of shit could happen to you. So the military tends to be fiercely loyal to the office of the commander-in-chief. And this is why the military is so important. And in other news, we have Trump now threatening to deploy, and I have that article, threatening to deploy, quote unquote, more than just the National Guard to U.S. cities. So let's go down the list of the damage that Trump is causing to the deep state. He's getting a whole bunch, hundreds of thousands of people got fired from the federal government during the shutdown. So he's getting rid of their operatives in government. He's arresting the criminals, the high-level operatives who happen to be involved in criminal activity, because this is the dirt that keeps all the roots together, right? The criminal activity. They're getting arrested. They're getting indicted. They're snitching. They're telling on other people. You got the military running around, grabbing the people that operate behind the scenes, that stage the riots, stage the rallies, and all that shit. They're getting rid of those people. You got the mass deportation of the illegal aliens. You got the war on the cartels. So it's almost like everything not only that, you got the slow separation from Israel, believe it or not. Remember the slide I showed you guys with J.D. Vance saying, fuck the wall, he ain't kissing the wall? Yeah, that was a signal. You see, Trump can't do it because he's the guy that the Mossad would have their eyes on, because he's the one that has to sign the papers and make the decision. But J.D. Vance, being his hand-selected running mate, also has the power to serve as a spokesperson for Trump in the public eye. So he can't necessarily make the decisions the president makes, unless, of course, the line of succession happens where Trump is incapacitated, can't serve, then the vice president becomes the president. But as long as Trump is in office, Trump is the decision maker. J.D. Vance is essentially just a figurehead or a placeholder. He's the second string, but he does have major influence and the ability to reach millions of people with his messaging, because he's seen as a spokesperson for the Trump administration. So when he refused to kiss the wall, that was essentially Trump letting America know where he stands when it comes to these people. So when you see him playing grab ass with Netanyahu on TV and them laughing and smiling and chatting it up, he's just playing his role. Now, I know a lot of people want to see Trump, say fuck Israel altogether, or in some extreme cases, even launch an attack against them for what they did in Gaza, because what they did in Gaza was extremely disgusting and reprehensible. Hell, what they're still doing. And I'm with you on that. But here is the problem. Here's the problem. You have to remember, what Israel did was a bold move. They attacked their own people, and then they started attacking Gaza. They used that as an excuse to attack Gaza. And they did all this in the face of the rest of the world, as if to say, what you gonna do about it? And guess what? Hardly anybody did anything about it. There was a whole bunch of tough talk, but nothing was done, because they're still doing it. To a certain extent, not as extensively as they were before Trump stepped in, but to a certain extent, they're still doing it. And as much as we would have liked to see Trump step in and stop that shit, this is what people don't understand. Israel has America by the balls. America is compromised, and they're compromised, the federal government that is, and they're compromised through their ties with Israel, from Congress all the way to the agencies. So from the elected positions to the appointed positions. And with that network of high-level operatives within the federal government, they also have much larger networks of lower-level operatives. So Trump's surrounded by enemies. And this is why it took 2 terms for him to get the right people in there to actually start making big moves, big public moves against the deep state. So he has to tread lightly, because the minute he openly says he's cutting ties with Israel, look what they did to Kennedy. The moment he says he's not doing that shit, he ain't rocking with them no more, they're going to either kill him, kill his family, or start killing people in his administration. And not only that, they also have the ability, with their sleeper cells that still haven't been caught yet because they're flying under the radar, they still have the ability to kill millions of Americans, or thousands or hundreds of thousands of Americans, if they were given the order. And this is why what Trump is doing in those cities is so important, because he's also going after those people, but they're not all caught yet. So it's not safe yet. But the more these operations continue, is the more resistance to Israel you're going to start seeing. Trump already threatened to cut off all support. That means all prior promises to Israel, he's going to cut it off. J.D. Vance is not kissing the wall. Trump just had a meeting with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping just threatened the shit out of Israel and said they're going to wipe them off the map if they touch their aid ships, which Israel has been sinking aid ships because they want to starve the people of Gaza. But China is getting their ships in there because Israel can't fuck with China. And Trump is not going to help Israel if they do fuck with China. But what Trump is working on with Israel is not only separating the federal government from the infiltration and flushing out the infiltration to make it safe to operate freely. He's also trying to cut off America's dependency on the Rothschild banking system, the Federal Reserve System. And that's a bigger deal than any amount of chaos or turmoil in the world, because that banking system is what controls the entire control mechanism. That's the brain of the entire control mechanism. So here's what could happen. Trump could bomb Israel tomorrow, cut off all aid. Guess what? They're just going to go somewhere else, set up shop, and they already have Western Europe completely infiltrated. They've had them infiltrated for hundreds of years. So they'll go to Western Europe, set up shop, and then start launching wars and destabilizing the world in order to try to reestablish their banking system. Why do you think they're leveling Gaza? They're leveling Gaza because they have to build a canal to open up shipping lanes to Asia. Because Egypt, who is a sworn enemy of Israel, they have control of the Suez Canal. So it's only by the grace of Egypt that Israel is even getting shipments into their country of manufactured goods. And you got Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE to the east of Israel. So any goods coming by land would have to go through those territories. And guess what? Israel just dropped bombs on Qatar. So guess who ain't fucking with Israel no more? You see? So Trump has to set the stage worldwide for the rest of the world to align themselves strictly against Israel, set up their own financial system that we could then become a part of, which is the quantum financial system that the BRICS is setting up. Destroy Israel's any opportunity Israel has to build their Ben Gurion Canal, and basically strangle them through the Suez Canal, which the BRICS would then control. That leads to economic isolation. And once Israel is economically isolated, now the entire world has laid siege to Israel. So instead of them being in control, the people will then be in control. And this is why the changes in leadership throughout the last 10 years had to happen around the world, because the blackmailed and the sellout politicians in those countries that are loyal to Israel, they had to be removed and replaced with patriots. This is how we got Malai and the guy in El Salvador. I can't remember his name. This is how we got Xi Jinping, believe it or not. President Modi in India. Prince bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. You see, the changes in leadership had to happen because those governments now within their own country will have enough control over their own money that they can safely make the transition to a gold-backed currency and establish the quantum financial system. This is the reason why under every other deep state president, these countries were being invaded and destabilized, and the governments were being ousted and replaced with puppet leaders. because those puppet leaders would not want to ditch the dollar and switch to a gold-backed currency. They would play ball. So when Q says where we go one, we go all worldwide, this whole systematic takedown has to happen worldwide because the system operates worldwide. It's the American Masons against and the other patriotic Masons throughout the world against the international Masons, the Illuminati controlled Masons, the satanic Masons, the ones that don't believe in God, the doest thou wilt guys. So this is a worldwide thing. And just like in America, how you have patriots and deep state, China had patriots, deep state, Russia, patriots, deep state. In Europe, there's patriots and then there's deep state. And Vladimir Putin over in Russia is basically about 10 years in his plan, 10 years ahead of Trump, meaning his swamp has been completely drained. No deep state, no Satanists, none of that LGBT bullshit, no Khazarian media, none of that shit. And Russia has grown significantly economically. Because the stranglehold of the Rothschild banking system no longer functions in Russia. So Russia is free to operate and they have their trade lines with China and the rest of the BRICS nations. This is why over the years I've been reporting on all these new nations joining BRICS, the BRICS Development Bank, which is in competition now with the IMF and the World Bank. The transitions we're seeing in these African countries where the French are being kicked out and the Chinese are being welcomed in. And people say the Chinese are over there extorting those Africans, but they're not. They're actually doing fair business. And this is why the French were kicked out and the Chinese were brought in, because the Chinese offered them a better deal. And once the Chinese came in, the transition to the gold-backed currencies started to happen. And now China is doing business with those countries, and those countries are actually able to prosper. And this is why we have the current situation over there in Sudan. I don't know if you guys heard about it, and in Nigeria, where you have Islamic militants running around slaughtering Christians and posing a threat to the government. In fact, some people say they've infiltrated the government, and that's why the government ain't doing nothing to stop them. That's why that's happening, because they're moving away from the Rothschild banking system. And as those nations become more economically prosperous, they become more powerful on the international trade markets. And as they become more powerful on the international trade markets, they start to make more money. They start to build up a more powerful military, form more effective alliances. And now they're insulated against the deep state and the Rothschild banking system and the Khazarian controllers. And they now can say, fuck you, we're dealing with these guys. But just like in days of old, when American presidents would deploy the U.S. military to tear up and destabilize these countries, in more recent years, like during the Obama administration, that strategy changed from using our military directly to using private contractors and foreign contractors that we call proxy armies, that are being paid under the table by the deep state to act as mercenaries and go out and destabilize these countries, essentially do what the U.S. military was used to do. But people caught on to that scam of using our military to do it, and so they had to change their strategies. You see, Obama came in and criticized Bush for the wars, right? And he said he was going to bring the troops home and all that shit. Well, he kind of did. But as he brought our American troops home, he deployed the Islamic militants over there instead to do the exact same thing. Hence, not only did nothing change, shit got worse. Because Libya was still functioning while Bush was tearing up Iraq and Afghanistan. Libya and Syria were still functioning. So Bush tore up Iraq and Afghanistan. Obama came in, tore up Libya, Syria, Bahrain, and a bunch of other countries. Ukraine. So now what we're seeing is the deep state militant proxy army being deployed in Africa to try to stop the BRICS, because the more established the BRICS nations become is the more powerful Egypt becomes. The more powerful Egypt becomes is the more control over the Suez Canal they'll have. And this is why control over that canal is important. That canal has locks, dams, bridges, and ports. And somebody has to control and maintain all of that shit. And the money to maintain and control all of that shit has to come from somewhere. Well, it comes from the ships passing through the canal. They have kind of like tolls where the ships would pay a toll. It's called a transit fee. And if Egypt controls the Suez Canal, they're entitled to those transit fees. So every ship going through the Suez Canal back and forth from Europe to Asia are paying Egypt to go through that canal. So Egypt is making bank. But right now, they're still using the fiat currency. So the ships going to Western Europe, which is deep state controlled, the ships going to Israel, which is deep state controlled, and all the other deep state countries within that region coming from Asia, they're still able to make it through the Suez Canal. So how do you cut off the deep state? Flip the switch to a gold-backed currency, activate the quantum financial system where only gold-backed digital currencies can be used, and the central bank digital currencies, which would be your fiat digital US dollar, won't be tradable on that market. You ever use one of those trading apps and you look for a certain stock or you find a certain crypto or something and you click on it, but the buy button doesn't appear at the bottom of the screen when you look at the stats of that coin? That's because it's not tradable on that platform. That's essentially what the fiat currency will become. It'll still exist. It'll still be in use because we're still going to be stuck on it for a while. But for the rest of the world, they'll all have tradable currencies. So guess what? The ships that are being paid, the goods that are being bought with fiat currency from Europe and the deep state controlled parts of the Middle East, mainly Israel, those ships will not be able to pay the transit fees to Egypt with fiat currency. So then they'll be stopped and they'll be held up. So essentially, that switch to a gold-backed currency once the BRICS is fully established. This is why Trump's been meeting with Putin and Xi Jinping and all those guys. Once the BRICS is fully established, it'll essentially lay siege to the entire deep state operation over there in Western Europe and the rest of the world. It's a brilliant fucking plan. But that's the whole Trump-Israel thing, and the plan is much bigger. So this is why, so essentially what I'm saying is Trump is doing everything that we've been complaining about over the years that we want to see changed. But because those problems had become so pervasive, that infiltration had become so deeply entrenched, now the process that the Trump administration has to go through to correct those issues, and we can see those issues being corrected, it may not always be a favorable process. So you might, in your mind, think, hey, he should do it this way. But from his perspective, knowing a hell of a lot more than we know, he understands that we cannot afford to fail. We only get one shot at this, so it has to be done this way. And this is why, even in the midst of Trump saying and doing shit that a lot of Trump supporters didn't support, I always try to read between the lines and compare what he's saying to what he's actually doing and paint you a better picture. And this is why I have not stopped supporting Trump, because I understand that the game that he's playing is far more advanced than my understanding. But I do have enough of an understanding to know that there's certain factors that are involved in this situation, in this total aggregate operation, that Trump has to take into consideration in order to not make mistakes. Because let's say he bombs Israel, takes out the deep state overnight, which he has the ability to because he's got the entire military at his disposal. Guess what'll happen? More infiltrators are going to pop up, and they're going to re-infiltrate, and they might invest another 20 years in taking over again. And then in 20 years, we're right back to where we were. But if the entire machine is dismantled, it can't produce any more proxies. It can't produce any more puppets. It can't produce any more tools of control. And this is why Trump said we can never let this happen again. This is what it takes to make sure that this never happens again. Looks like we got trolls showing up already. I don't know who you are, but you can go have your testicles discussion elsewhere. Thank you. Now, the other element in this thumbnail that may have caught your attention is this one. After 700 years, the Knights Templar are welcomed back to the Vatican. The Crusaders' spirit lives on. Now, there's a lot behind the Knights Templar and their disbandment that people don't really know. And this ties into the whole secret society thing and how these Satanists were able to actually take over the Vatican, and how the Khazars were able to take over the Vatican. And it's a very interesting story that involves the King of France and Pope Boniface or whatever the hell his name is, the 8th, I believe it was, and the overthrow that happened around 1300 AD, which was about 100 years after the disbandment of the after the total disbandment of the Khazarian kingdom. It's a very, very interesting story, and I got some details on it that we're going to go through. So sit tight and hold on to your hats. And now that we're 30 minutes in, make sure you guys go subscribe to the Citizen Man backup channel. If you haven't subscribed to the backup channel, please make sure you do, because if they zap me over here on Citizen Man TV, that's where you'll find me, on the backup channel. All right. Also, if you want to get the rest of my content, I got over 520 some odd videos, maybe 530 videos now on Rumble, long form shows mostly. Great information, deep research on all kinds of topics. So I suggest you go explore the channel, give me a follow, help us grow the channel and get this information out, because there's a lot of things that people don't know and don't understand, and it's making them susceptible to be misled. I call it the prerequisite knowledge. There's certain things that you have to, when getting into these discussions, there's certain things you have to know off the bat going into the discussion in order to effectively not only understand what's being discussed, but also contribute and theorize from that discussion, because a lot of the future predictions that I make tend to come true. And the power that gives me is I can read the board. Even if I didn't get on here and broadcast, I could still read the board, see what's coming next, and know what to do in order to effectively protect myself and my family in whatever way they would need to be protected. But for the unsuspecting person, they won't see the warning signs. They won't see it coming until it's right on top of them, and, well, they lose. So I don't want y'all to lose, man. The books are being pulled because the links to the books and the affiliate pages have expired. The contracts are over, so I'm not going to be promoting the books anymore. I'm still looking for other helpful products that I could promote in the in my merch vertical, or whatever you might want to call it. But also, there's always the donate button. So if you guys would like to support the show, by sending in a kind donation. You can do so via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo by using the tag scrolling across the screen in the banner below. The links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box. Well, they're going to be pinned because I'm going to pin them right now. In the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow, just click on the yellow. The box will open up and all the links will be there. And until I post those links, you can also find those very support links, those very same support links in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. And by the way, the red X through the PayPal logo is just a reminder that PayPal censors comments. There's no free speech, and they will claim that you said something they didn't like to freeze both of our accounts and steal our money. So if you are going to donate on PayPal, keep it surface level so you can protect yourself. Oh, quick shout out. Want to give a big shout out to my sister Joy, who hit the Cash App. I believe it was either earlier today or yesterday. Shout out to Sister Joy for that support. And I also want to give a big shout out to a good brother. I thought we lost him. My brother Lee 14224. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I hadn't been shouting him out for a while because he hadn't been here for the last 3 shows. But brother Lee is still with us, and he did hit me on the PayPal. I appreciate that support, brother. He says, "What you mean my EBT ain't taken? Run it, run it, egg in. Have a great Sunday show." Shout out to brother Lee for that support, man. I appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you. All right, so like I said, big things are happening. And there's some major events that we need to pay attention to. I have some examples here. Jackson, Mississippi, 2 Mississippi sheriffs. Those are actual elected sheriffs. 2 Mississippi sheriffs, 12 officers charged in drug trafficking bribery scheme, officials say. And we're starting to see a lot of law enforcement, an unusually high amount of reports of law enforcement, local law enforcement, being taken down by the feds. And you know what's really happening? And this is just my opinion. The people that are being arrested in the Caribbean in Operation Southcom, the cartel folks that ain't getting blown up, they are telling. And they're telling on their American buyers. And so the military runs the busts on the water. They pass the intel to the civilian forces. Remember, Joint Special Operations Task Force, JSOC, or Joint Special Operations Command. Sorry, military guys. I didn't mean to get that wrong. They're passing the information to federal law enforcement and DOD here on the ground, you know, the military that's deployed in all these cities, and the FBI that's now controlled by Kash Patel is being forwarded to these guys on the ground. They're going after the American buyers, and the American buyers are then snitching on their buyers, and the list goes on. And these police are being caught up in these drug stings and these drug operations because they're being snitched on, they're being told on. I mean, if you've been following, shout out to the brother Choke No Joke. If you've been following Choke No Joke and his coverage of the Tupac and Biggie assassinations and who was all involved, and you know, researching every bit of evidence pertaining to those murders, there's a lot of stories in there or one major story in there about Reggie Wright Jr., who was a Compton PD officer and ended up becoming a federal informant because he got busted in Memphis trafficking marijuana in the 90s when it was illegal, trafficking marijuana, or I think it was the 80s. I'm not sure. Trafficking marijuana from California to Memphis, Tennessee. We also have the stories of Bill Clinton in Mena, Arkansas, with the help of the state police when he was governor, conducting his cocaine importation operation, which then expanded by multitudes once he became president. So There's these dirty cops all over the place, and these criminals and these crooks and these dishonest people and these thieves and these swindlers, all in the government in positions of power, getting elected to office. 2 sheriffs in Mississippi, not 1, but 2. So the swamp is being drained. The operatives are being removed. Let's see here. Federal authorities on Thursday announced indictments against 20 people, including 14 current or former Mississippi Delta law enforcement officers that allege the officers took bribes to provide safe passage to people they believed were drug traffickers. You see? So the cops weren't even dealing the drugs themselves. They were just helping the drug traffickers. And you know what? Sounds like a good way to make money, to tell you the truth, because you ain't dealing the drugs. One of the indictments, which charges 15 people, says law enforcement officers provided armed escort services on multiple occasions to an FBI agent posing as a member of a Mexican drug cartel. You see? FBI agent posing as a cartel member. What did I tell you? And where's the dope coming from? The areas that Operation Southcom is covering right now. I told you that before I even read this shit. And the intel's being passed from the military to the civilian forces or to the ground forces, and the ground forces are setting up their operations and busting their people, busting their targets. The indictment alleges the officers understood they were transporting 25 kilos, 55 pounds of cocaine, excuse me, through Mississippi Delta counties and into Memphis. You see? What did I tell you? What did I tell you? So Trump going after the cartels with the military the way he is, and then setting up the domestic operations at the same time, is actually yielding real results. And the sheriffs, those are elected positions. So that means that if it were left up to the people, sure, they could have voted out the governor. They could have voted out their mayor, voted out their county commissioners, voted out their city council, their city councilmen, whatever. But who's to say they wouldn't have voted in 2 other crooks? Because these 2 Mississippi sheriffs, those 2 crooks got voted in. So if left solely up to the people through elections alone, that wouldn't solve the problem. That would just recycle the same players, but it'll be the same damn chessboard, same damn position, same damn chess game. So what do? You wipe the whole board. And who has the power to wipe the board? The military, in conjunction with the FBI. They're working under the Joint Special Operations Task Force. I believe Southcom is working under the Joint Southern Command. I read about it on the last show. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was the Joint Southern Command. They're the ones busting the source and then getting the information of the buyers here in America. And then JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, which does involve DOJ elements, which would include the FBI. They're busting the targets here in the U.S. So their deep state operation is being dismantled from the ground up. This is why under every other deep state president, although there were tons and tons of drugs flowing in from that part of the world, thanks to the cartels, they always found a reason to go fight a fucking war in the Middle East. This is why that was happening, because they were working with these cartels. Remember Operation Fast and Furious? Well, for those of you who aren't aware of Operation Fast and Furious, go look it up. It was the Obama administration under Eric Holder running guns, and I believe he was the attorney general at the time, running guns to Mexican cartels, rival cartels, in hopes to start a war. Because when the drug wars start down in Mexico and down in South and Central America, the coke price goes up. And if they were dealing in cocaine or profiting from the cocaine trafficking, they would want that war because then the coke price goes up. So they do the same shit and they make more money. But you see, again, when Trump came into office, he was already a multi-billionaire. So he's not interested in making money. He really is interested in cutting the head of the snake off. And we're literally seeing it happen in real time. We've went through the military documents of the Joint Special Operations Task Force. We went through the documents pertaining to Southern Command, so we should have a full understanding. See, the prerequisite knowledge. We should have the prerequisite knowledge of what these operations are doing, and then see the connections. Because remember, we're hearing the news about the drug boats getting bombed, right? But we're not hearing the news about the drug boats that actually stop and the people get arrested. Because that's happening more often than the boats are getting bombed. And the few bombings of the boats is being used as propaganda to discourage the boats. But because these are major operations with lots and lots of money on the line and people's lives literally depending on it, they're running the boats. But not everybody is brave enough to get themselves blown up. And showing the videos of the boats getting blown up is going to encourage other boats when they see the military rolling up on them, when they see that Black Hawk fly over, or that drone following them, or that ship running up on them, or that skiff with the Navy SEALs on it running up on them. They'll be inclined to stop. Because it'll be in the back of their mind that, oh shit, they will shoot. So imagine how many guys are being taken in, being shipped to Guantanamo Bay, because that's where they're sending them, being interrogated, and then that information being relayed back to JSOC here in the United States. Shit's getting real in the field, man. Shit is getting real in the field. Check this out. Former Clackamas, Oregon County Commissioner on the run. Democrat Melissa Fireside used fake ID to enter Mexico, then flew to Amsterdam with child, DOJ says. While facing felony theft and forgery charges, Fireside allegedly slipped across the border using a fake identity and booked a Mexico to Amsterdam flight, all from right here in my country. And I guess the my country would be Karen Sokoloff. So Melissa Fireside is a county commissioner who's on the run for forgery and theft, right? Now, how would DOJ be onto this? Either the Doge investigations, right? That's one way, or through the drug busts and the intel that they're collecting on the drug busts, they're arresting American people, American government officials, and in exchange for lesser sentences, those government officials are now snitching on their colleagues, because these people are not gangsters. They're not gangsters, because if they were gangsters, they wouldn't be in government. They're just two-bit criminals that found a way to get power to protect their criminal operation. That's all they are. So when they get busted, they don't want to go to jail. So they're telling. So as I sit here and assume it's the Doge investigations that's catching these people with the fraud, it could very well be good old snitches. Can't take that off the table. Or it could be a combination of both, where Doge finds it, they forward it to DOJ, DOJ starts questioning people, and then somebody tells. Check this one out. So the FBI did a raid in Dearborn, Michigan, and it was posted all over Instagram. And if you know anything about Dearborn, Michigan is damn near a Islamicist stronghold, right? And it's very interesting that this FBI bust happened in Dearborn, Michigan, and you got the Islamicists being activated over in Africa to kill Christians and take over these countries. It seems like they were probably preparing to activate here as well. But I don't know. I'm just assuming. This is all we know. This morning, that was about 2 days ago, I think, the FBI thwarted a potential terrorist attack and arrested multiple subjects in Michigan who were allegedly plotting a violent attack over Halloween weekend. FBI agents carried out raids in Dearborn, multiple, in Dearborn and Inkster as part of the investigation. We will update when more information is available. So they were allegedly plotting a violent terror attack. So people are being surveilled, communications are being intercepted, and people who once were not on the radar are somehow being put on the radar, and these busts are happening. And I believe it's all connected back to Operation Southcom. People are telling. David Emmanuel says, I'm from Detroit, and Dearborn is like 90% Arab and Muslims. Yeah, I remember when Mike Myers did a piece, or what the fuck is that fat, sloppy dude's name, the movie producer? Michael Moore. Michael Moore did a piece about Dearborn, Michigan, and how there's a Muslim takeover. So as we see Islamists being activated over in Africa, they're trying to activate over here, but Trump's already on them. Now, this picture kind of made me chuckle a little bit because it took me back to that headline where Diddy was asking the judge to let him do his sentence at Fort Dix. And I just, for the life of me, couldn't figure out why, of all places, he would want to go to he would want to stay in Fort Dix. Like, what's so special at Fort Dix that Diddy would want so bad that he would say, well, if you're gonna lock me up, put me in here. You know, I just can't figure it out. And it's been a head scratcher. But nevertheless, this is supposed to be, there's a few images that allegedly have been published that claim to be pictures of Diddy in prison. And this is allegedly Diddy in prison, just having a good old time. Now, I'm not sure what facility he's at because I don't really follow celebrity news that deep, but I can definitely look it up and let you guys know. But I would assume, if I had to guess, I would want to say, since he's been asking to stay at Fort Dix and he's in this picture having a great old time and laughing it up, I would have to assume he's probably at Fort Dix getting exactly what he wants. Whatever it is that he wants at Fort Dix, maybe the food's better. I don't know. So that's allegedly Diddy. Now, maybe it's Diddy, maybe it's not Diddy. I don't know, but I just thought it was funny because I haven't heard anything about him being moved from Fort Dix, and there he is having a good old time as if, you know, he got what he wanted at Fort Dix. Maybe the food's better. Maybe the food's just better. So I did mention the bust in Dearborn, Michigan. So let me show you something about the about the Nigeria, the Africa thing. So apparently, because there's been a lot of videos of you know, mass murders and shit. I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Being shared all over social media, floating around on social media. I'll just say that. And it apparently is Islamic terror groups killing mass numbers of civilians in order to seize territories of countries, ethnically cleanse the countries, and eventually take them over. But Trump tells the military to prepare for action against Islamist militants in Nigeria. And the people who control the Islamist militants a lot of times tend to be Israeli Mossad officers. There was one guy that got busted in Syria who was supposed to be a ISIS commander, and he was actually an Israeli Mossad agent. So this move against the Islamist militants by Trump should be expected because they really are the bad guys and they really do work for the bad guys. U.S. president, because they're proxies of the deep state. U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered the military to prepare for action in Nigeria to tackle Islamist militant groups accusing the government of failing to protect Christians. Trump did not say which killings he was referring to, but claims of a genocide against Nigeria's Christians have been circulating in recent weeks and months in some right-wing U.S. circles. Groups monitoring violence say there is no evidence to suggest that Christians are being killed more than Muslims in Nigeria, which is roughly evenly divided between followers of the two religions. An advisory to Nigeria's president told the BBC that any military action against the jihadist groups should be carried out together. Daniel Bwala said Nigeria would welcome U.S. help in tackling the Islamist insurgents, but noted that it was a sovereign country. He also said the jihadists were not targeting members of a particular religion and that they had killed people from all faiths or none. Now, here's where that can get confusing. In Islam, those Muslims over there in the eastern part of the world, they are Sunnis and Shiite Muslims. They're separate groups of Muslims. And I believe the Sunni Muslims are the radical Islamists, and the Shiite Muslims are the Muslims that they target. This is why in Syria there was Muslims killing Muslims, because it was the Sunnis killing off the Shiites. So they were killing off Shiite Muslims and Christians. So to the untrained eye that didn't know the difference between the Shiite and the Sunni Muslims and just saw them all as Muslims would then see that big picture as Muslims killing Muslims and Christians and then be saying, well, it couldn't be religiously motivated because they killed Muslims and Christians, when in fact it actually is religiously motivated. They're just a group of Muslims killing other Muslims who they disagree with and killing the Christians who they obviously don't like. So it's more than just Muslim killing Muslims. It's Sunni Muslims killing Shiite Muslims and killing Christians, because the Sunni Muslims believe they are supposed to be the supreme ruling class, and the Shiite Muslims are like, let's all live together in harmony. So the Shiites tend to be more aligned with the Christians, whereas the Sunnis tend to be more misaligned or divided from the Christians, and thus they hate the Shiites for it, for their acceptance of the Christians. And this is why we have the situation where these radical Islamists are killing Muslims too. So in fact, they are killing because of their religion. Nigeria's president, Bola Tinubu, has insisted there is religious tolerance in the country and said the security challenges were affecting people across faiths and regions. You see, the president, he's an idiot. He's a fool. He was tricked. He was fooled. Because the religious tolerance that he sees is the tolerance between, or that he would see, is the tolerance between the Shiite Muslims and the Christians being cool. But he's not paying attention, or he's not considering or including the fact that these are two different Muslim groups. And before these attacks started happening, the Sunnis still felt the way that they felt about the Shiites and the Christians, but they were getting along with the Shiites and the Christians because the time to attack hadn't come yet. The orders hadn't been given and the cash hadn't been dispersed. Now it has, so they're going ham, so they're taking off. They were the sleeper cell. And that's exactly what they would start doing here in the United States if Trump abruptly pulled the plug on Israel. There will be mass shootings and there will be armies of armed gunmen, leftists and being led by Israeli Mossad agents, running around just mowing people down, running up into schools. If they hit 20 schools in 3 different states in one day, all eyes would be on those events. And they would get the attention that they wanted, and they would get the capitulation that they wanted. So it's the same, and it's the same tactic that the Zionists use, right? They call themselves the juice crew, but they're not really the juice crew. They're Khazars. And the real juice crew, who gets along with everybody else, now are aligned, now have to, in our minds, in the outsiders' minds, associate the two as one when they're not. So you got the Khazars posing as the juice crew and them mixing in with the juice crew. So when we see the Khazars in action, all we see is the juice crew going after their own juice crew. But we don't see that they're Khazars going after the real ones. You dig? It's the same tactic that the Sunnis use with the Shiites. That's how they are able to infiltrate these countries, build up their numbers, lie in wait, and then attack. They're here too. They just haven't been activated yet because the cash hadn't been dispersed and the order hasn't been given. And a lot of them that are lying in wait, once the order, they're under surveillance, and once the order is given, they get stopped. Hence that bust in Dearborn. Well, those raids in Dearborn, because it wasn't just one. But anyway, Trump wrote in a social media post on Saturday that he had instructed the U.S. Department of War, I like that name, to prepare for a possible action. He warned that he might send the military into Nigeria guns ablazing unless the Nigerian government intervened, and said that all aid to what he called the now disgraced country would be cut. Trump added, "If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attacked our cherished Christians." U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth replied to the post by writing, "Yes, sir. The Department of War is preparing for action. Either the Nigerian government protects Christians or we will kill the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities." Trump's threat has triggered alarm across Nigeria. Many on social media are urging the government to step up its fight against Islamist groups to avert a situation where foreign troops were sent into the country. Mr. Bawala, who said he was a Christian pastor, told the BBC's NewsHour program that Trump had a unique way of communicating and that Nigeria was not taking his words literally. Oh yeah, Mr. Bawala? Well, you're about to be pleasantly surprised, sir. "We know the heart and intent of Trump is to help us fight insecurity," he said, adding that he hoped Trump would meet Tinubu in the coming days to discuss the issue. Trump earlier announced that he had declared Nigeria a country of particular concern because of the existential threat posed to its Christian population. He said thousands had been killed without providing any evidence. This is a designation used by the U.S. State Department that provides for sanctions against countries engaged in severe violations of religious freedom. Following this announcement, Tinubu said his government was committed to working with the U.S. The government was committed to working with the U.S. and the international community to protect communities of all faiths. The characterization of Nigeria as religiously intolerant does not reflect our national reality, the Nigerian leader said in a statement. Well, that seems to be debunked by what's actually happening. Remember I told you that guy's an idiot? He's a fucking idiot. Jihadist groups such as Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa province have wrought havoc in northeastern Nigeria for more than a decade, killing thousands of people. However, most of these have been Muslims, according to ACLED, a group which analysis political. That's not how you spell analyzes, is it? Am I tripping? Which analyzes political violence around the world. Or analysis, is that supposed to be a word? Is that even a word? Just sounds wrong. Anyway, in central Nigeria, hang on a second, because I notice ain't nobody hit the Cash App or nothing. So I am going to get on camera because you guys seem to like me better when I'm on camera. So there you go. In central Nigeria, there are also frequent clashes between mostly Muslim herders and farming groups who are often Christian. over access to water and pasture. Deadly cycles of tit-for-tat attacks have also seen thousands killed, but atrocities have been committed on both sides, and human rights groups say there is no evidence that Christians have been disproportionately targeted. Trump has frequently expressed dissatisfaction over not having embroiled the U.S. in a war during his tenure and has cast himself as a peacemaking president. But the Republican leader is facing a growing number of voices domestically, particularly from the political right, who have drawn attention to the situation in Nigeria. Now, here's the thing. Trump did say no more wars, but he's waging war on the cartels. And guess what? It's a righteous war. And guess how many Americans have been killed in that war against the cartels? As far as I know, none. Now he's talking about war in Nigeria. And who's he going to war against? The Islamist groups, which are deep state funded. They're deep state proxies. Another righteous war that should happen if it were to happen. It would be justified because he's not going in there to destabilize the government and overthrow the government and help the Islamists like Obama was doing. He's actually going in there to restore peace. That would be a righteous war. But I don't even think it'll be as big as, a multi-thousand troop deployment. It'll be small special operations units deployed across the country, and they will be basically hunting down the leadership and chopping the head off the snake. Because before the Southcom war started happening against the cartels, what do you think Special Ops was doing? How many cartel bosses you heard got arrested or killed in Mexico in like the 2 years leading up to 2025? Well, there you go. You chop the head off the snake, you take out a few big names that everybody think is untouchable, and you show them that I can touch them. And now that I can touch the guy that you're afraid of, that you think is untouchable, now you have to either capitulate and cooperate with me, or we'll touch you too. Pause. See how that works? And also, somebody asked me, they were like, well, if Trump is so gung-ho to go in to stop the Islamic genocide that's happening in Nigeria, why wasn't he so quick to move on Gaza? Where was this energy for Gaza when Israel was attacking Gaza? And you know what? That is a fair question. Because, again, on the surface, it looks like Trump is sucking up to Israel. It looks like Trump is afraid of Israel. It looks like Trump is working with Israel, but it's not that. Israel literally has America held hostage. And just like we see these armies of armed gunmen running through villages, killing people in these third world countries, they will try that shit here. They have enough manpower to do that shit here. And that's what Trump's trying to prevent. That's what he's trying to avoid. So it was incumbent on the rest of the world that was so vocal against Israel to move on Israel. Because guess what? Iran launched missiles at Israel. And did America attack Iran? No. Trump bombed 3 abandoned nuclear facilities in Iran, demolishing them. The people cheered for it, and it was broadcast in the media as if Trump attacked Iran on behalf of Israel. Like, that shit just went over everybody's heads. And all I did was looked up the sites that he actually bombed. And guess what? A year before they were bombed, they moved to different locations. It's that easy. It's literally that easy. And all the so-called smart conservatives that are, I guess they're just propagandized fools, just slightly smarter than the left. Trump attacked Trump attacked Iran on behalf of Israel. Trump works for Israel. Like, you fucking idiot. You believe the fake news now? Is that what we're doing now? We believe the fake news? You know what I'm saying? But if any other country would have allied with Iran to wipe out Israel, Israel would have been wiped out, and Trump wouldn't have did a damn thing about it. But there would have been pressure on him from the religious right to do something about it. And that would have compromised his good standing with a large portion of his support base. So even that in itself probably would have been a mistake and a bad move. So everything had to play out the way it's playing out. But when it comes to Nigeria, they don't have any infiltrations here. They don't have major infiltrations here in the U.S. They're not all in and throughout our government and our judicial system like Israel is. So it's easy to make threats against them and go after them and shut their shit down in a hurry, because they pose no threat to the United States or the people of this country domestically, but Israel does. Remember, they did 9/11. They did 9/11. You think they can't do it again? Their people own the biggest buildings and the most properties. Their people own residential buildings where thousands of people live. You know, the Twin Towers that Larry Silverstein helped take down, those could have been apartment buildings. Those could have been people with their families living in there, you know, like in Gaza. And all it takes is for them to say, yeah, go ahead, Mossad. I'll take the 250. I'll take the $2 billion or the $2 million to let you wire up and demolish my building. It wasn't up to code anyway. I had a whole bunch of code violations and I was going to lose a lot of money. The property would have been undervalued. I couldn't keep my tenants because the place would be unlivable, so I wouldn't make money anyway. So this is how we'll cash out. I let you bomb the place and I collect the insurance money. So you get your mass murder event, your blood sacrifice event, and I get to cash out of this bad deal that I'm in. It's that easy. Boko Haram and the Islamists, they don't have a foothold like that. So they don't pose as much of a threat. And that's what people have to understand, the level of the threat. Once you understand the level of the threat, then you'll understand why it's being handled the way that it's being handled. Now, this leads me to the Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard situation. And what we see is the FBI at odds with Tulsi. Let me see if I can find that slide. There it is. FBI slams House proposal to grant Tulsi Gabbard leading role on counterintelligence. So the FBI, Kash Patel, is putting up resistance and saying, I don't want Tulsi Gabbard in on what we got going on. Which again leads me to believe that Tulsi Gabbard can't be trusted. Because the people that work for Tulsi, and if Tulsi Gabbard is in fact an infiltrator and she's trying to compromise Kash Patel's investigation, which would lead him to, you know, the small hats essentially. And Tulsi, being a former Democrat, is in the pocket of the small hats, which we could probably presume. She would use her position next to Kash Patel to undermine Kash Patel. Compromise Kash Patel, might even set Kash up to get deleted. They've done this before. This is standard operating procedure. Get a big name player in there in the top in a command and control top position, and use them to undermine the case. Essentially, run a cover up, leak information from the investigation to the suspected perpetrators, and help them undermine the case. And I trust Kash Patel more than I trust Tulsi Gabbard. And the fact that Kash Patel is putting up resistance to Tulsi says a lot. It just screams Israel. Now, a dispute has emerged within the U.S. intelligence community after Joe Kent, director of the National Counterterrorism Center and close aide to Tulsi Gabbard, accessed FBI files related to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So this is the guy who, in the last show we mentioned, was being blocked by the FBI, right? Joe Kent. I'm sorry that the picture's so dull. I forgot to brighten it up. But that's the guy, Joe Kent. And Joe Kent accessed FBI files related to the Charlie Kirk case. Now, it could be that he accessed the files because he was conducting his own investigation, Or it could be that he accessed the files to try to see what evidence the FBI had so he could tip off the alleged perpetrators and essentially undermine Kash Patel's investigation. FBI Director Kash Patel shut down Kent's probe, claiming it interfered with an ongoing investigation and was unauthorized. Reports say Patel was unaware Kent had obtained access, which came from a lower-ranking official. A tense White House meeting followed involving Patel, Kent, Tulsi Gabbard, VP J.D. Vance, and senior DOJ officials. So Mr. I'm not kissing the wall is there. Interesting. So he did it behind Kash Patel's back, and Kash Patel is saying that he's interfering with an ongoing investigation. So perhaps that investigation involves Tulsi Gabbard's people, and Joe Kent's being used to try to dig up any information that could be used to protect those people. Because if it's an ongoing investigation by one government agency, what is the need for another government agency to try to usurp essentially that agency and review the case as if they're going to take on the case? That kind of makes no sense. That sounds like redundancy, where you're going to prosecute the same people twice through two different agencies. That makes no sense. Because if the counterintelligence, the counterterrorism center was to be involved in this investigation, they would have been brought in from the onset, from the beginning. It's already federal. It's not like it started out being a state case and now the feds are stepping in. It's a federal fucking case. And the FBI is handling it. So Joe Kent and Tulsi Gabbard shouldn't have any dealings with it whatsoever. But the fact that they went behind Kash Patel's back and accessed those files is a huge red flag. And I agree with Kash Patel to block their asses, and Trump should fire Tulsi Gabbard because she's exposing herself. That's my opinion. Feel free to disagree. Okay. Let's see. Do I have anything on Tulsi? No. 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 Oh, we don't need that. Oh, that was the instrumental I played in the beginning. It's Lil Wayne, Pussy Money Weed. That's what it's called. It's called Pussy Money Weed. In the part where it says, "Oh yes, I love her," like it goes, "Oh yes, I love her like pussy, money, weed, pussy, money, weed, pussy, money, weed. Oh yes, I love her like." It's a dope ass song. Barnes says, "Citizen Man, do you think GOP should use nuclear option to end the shutdown? Trump's calling for it." I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. I have an article about it, so I'm gonna read it with you guys, and we'll give our own analysis. You know, I'll give you my analysis as we go. I think that's being organic like that is much more entertaining. So I do have an article about Trump's response to the whole situation, and I haven't read it. So on to the next one. So you have all this happening. You got Kash Patel basically closing the door on Tulsi Gabbard. You got all these moves being made worldwide. And now you got Trump officials are now moving into military housing due to safety concerns. Yeah, because they're getting to the top of the food chain and the threats are starting to come. Several senior Trump administration officials have moved into military housing in the Washington, D.C. area due to heightened security concerns and fears of political violence. This trend, reported in late October 2025, is described as unprecedented in scale for political appointees. Because I think the hammer is really about to drop and some big names are about to start going down. and some crazy shit is about to happen. I think this is the warning, you see? And the warning that you should heed the most is the one that sounds like no warning. And again, these are the warning signs that you have to have that prerequisite knowledge in order to interpret and understand and correctly deduce that something big is about to happen. Key details. Officials involved. The officials reportedly living on military bases include White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Navy Secretary John Fallon, and Army Secretary Daniel P. Driscoll have also moved into military housing. So Navy and Army, those would be your Special Operations Task Force, the military arms of the Special Operations Task Forces. Army, that's your National Guard deployment, your troop deployments. Navy, those would probably be your Special Operations units, your Marines, you know, the more hands-on kind of guys. Reasons for the move. Officials cite security threats as the primary reason. This includes general political polarization and a recent wave of violence directed at politicians, such as the killing of Charlie Kirk and an Iranian-backed assassination attempt. Iranian-backed? Why are they calling Trump's assassination attempt Iranian-backed? We don't know that. Some officials, like Miller, were targeted by activists and protesters at their private homes. Many have moved into houses on bases like Fort McNair, often on General's Row, in residences traditionally reserved for top military commanders, such as the Army's Vice Chief of Staff. Logistics and costs. Most civilian cabinet officials are reportedly paying fair market rates for the housing as calculated by the military. However, the influx of officials has created a housing crunch, impacting availability for top uniformed officers who typically reside there. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard was reportedly denied a request to move to Fort McNair due to a lack of space. That is interesting. That this is a totally different article. And again, Tulsi Gabbard is having a door slammed in her face. Something big is about to happen. And the fact that these cabinet members are moving on to military bases, it leads me to believe that they are in fear of assassination. And who conducts the high-level assassinations? The Israeli Mossad. I believe the move against Israel the public move against Israel is about to be made. And just like I was saying, they have these sleeper cells out there that are ready to go once the order is given. Once Trump starts doing whatever it is he plans on doing, which will be big, and I think it's going to stem from the Charlie Kirk assassination. Once Trump starts making that move, they're going to try to go after the cabinet members to create a chilling effect, make it too dangerous to go after these people. Like, people ask, like, if Hillary Clinton was so criminal and so blatantly evil, why didn't anybody in the DOJ choose to prosecute her? Because there were prosecutors that tried to prosecute her, but guess how many people committed suicide that were associated with her? 159 people, I believe, is the number. So when you got that many bodies on your kill list, there ain't a prosecutor on earth that would have the balls to go after you unless they had the full force and power of the military behind them, because that's what you would need to insulate yourself from somebody so dangerous. Well, whoever Trump is going after is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. So the full force and power of the military has to be behind it, including offering protection to potential targets of enemy assassinations. Controversy. The move has drawn criticism from some Democrats and military advocates. Concerns have been raised about the blurring of lines between civilian and military worlds and the optics of top administration officials using housing, while many service members and their families face inadequate housing conditions, including mold and lead paint issues. Well, a lower ranking soldier having lead and mold issues would not be moved into General's Row. Okay, he would not be taken out of his standard home and moved into General's Row. So let's get that straight. So these Trump administration officials are moving into the more expensive homes, which there's much less of. They're not moving into the regular middle class size houses. They're moving into the executive suites, essentially. So all the other military people still have access to their housing. But you know what else this is doing? This is drawing attention because look what's being mentioned. Inadequate housing conditions, mold, and lead paint issues. We didn't hear about these issues before those Trump administration officials moved in there. So by them moving in there and causing this stir, now these issues that the military personnel have been dealing with are now being brought to the forefront. So it serves two purposes or three purposes. Sends a warning to the patriots that the big move is about to be made, which would trigger hit teams to try to carry out assassinations, which means it's going to be a really big move. It's also providing protection for the VIPs, for the individuals in the command and control positions of these operations. And it's also now bringing awareness to ongoing issues that have not been addressed on these military bases. But something big is about to happen, and what it is, I don't know, but what it requires is military protection for Trump administration officials. And I think that is very, 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 very interesting, to say the least. I don't know about you guys, but that to me signals something big is about to happen. What is it? I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't tell you. Now, let's see. Okay, it starts there. So we'll get to the Knights Templar in a minute. So right before this move into the military bases happened, Trump says he is prepared to send more than the National Guard. What the fuck is this? Okay. You motherfuckers. Come on. I did all this already. What the fuck? Let me see. Oh, come on. They gave me access to the article already. I already had the fucking article. So anyway, Trump threatened to send more than threatened to send more than the military into these cities. And the more than the military means regular military combat units, full-time combat units. And considering that the FBI just carried out 3 counterterrorism raids in Michigan, that means, or that indicates, because there could have been more busts that happened across the country that we're not hearing about, but that indicates to me that these sleeper cells are starting to go live. And if they're starting to go live, reinforcements for our military will be needed because they will be the initial targets. And the reason why they will be the initial targets is because they will be the ones with the first responders responding to these mass casualty events. And if they're all over the streets, they'll be able to respond a lot faster than local law enforcement. So now those guys need to be supported and backed up because they're going to have targets on their backs. And why will they have targets on their backs? Because whatever it is that Trump is planning to do in the near future is going to be enough, is going to be big enough to trigger the enemy to send down the order to activate the sleeper cells. DOJ indicts Democratic congressional candidate Kate Abugazela over ICE protests. She called the charges yet another attempt by the Trump administration to criminalize protest and punish those who dare to speak up. Well, if you're leading protests and people are getting violent and people are getting hurt, those are no longer protests, those are riots. That's number one. Number two, if you're out there protesting for the rights of criminals, because illegal aliens are criminals and by law they should be treated under not only criminal code, but under the law of armed conflict because they're foreign nationals, then you're in support of foreign enemies. So you should be arrested. But freedom of speech is freedom of speech. But you see, she's not just being arrested for the protests. She's doing more because these politicians and these political hopefuls, they're always more deeply involved in the protest than just showing up and yelling on a bullhorn. They're handling the money. They're dispersing the funds. They're hiring the rioters. They're paying the protesters to come out and instructing them to be violent, that type of shit. So the fact that she got indicted means that she was into more than just protesting. Because there's other people out there that are protesting and yelling on bullhorns and they're not getting indicted. So obviously you got caught doing something. A special federal grand jury has indicted Democratic congressional candidate Kate Abugazela, whatever the hell, alongside other protesters who allegedly blocked vehicles outside of a federal immigration facility in Broadview, Illinois. Well, there it is. There it is. You're leading people to obstruct and impede traffic, which is a crime. And if that traffic happens to be federal law enforcement carrying out their duties, not only are you simply impeding traffic, but you're impeding law enforcement activity. And not only are you impeding law enforcement activity, authorized law enforcement activity, but you're impeding federal law enforcement activity. Thus, you're now going to jail. And I did a whole stream a few months ago telling you guys that this is what these Democrats are going to start getting arrested for: obstruction and impeding. And I read you the laws, what they stipulate, what they constitute, what's required for the charge. And everything these people are doing fits those two categories: obstruction and impeding. And anything beyond that that may involve violence will now be obstruction, impeding, battery on a federal officer, whatever. You're going down, and it's federal. Here, the indictment, which was filed October 23rd, alleges that Abugazela physically hindered and impeded, there's your magic word, impeded an agent who was forced to drive at an extremely slow rate of speed to avoid injuring any of the conspirators. Abugazela was charged alongside 5 other people, including 2 other political candidates. Right. And they're all Democrats. Okay, Squirrel Crypto, we get it. I literally just spent, guys, how long did I just spend explaining the Israel situation? How long was that? How much time did I spend on that? I just want a timestamp on that so we can direct Squirrel Crypto in the chat back to that portion so he can actually understand what's really happening, because based on his comments, he obviously doesn't. Well, he has a limited understanding of what's happening. What he doesn't understand is what has to be done in order to put an end to that. 30 minutes. Thank you, Barnes. 30 minutes. So, Squirrel Crypto, I appreciate what you're saying, but there's a 30-minute segment on this show That's probably, you can probably go back maybe 10 minutes from now, 40 minutes from now, where it starts. And I spend 30 minutes explaining the Israel situation. All right. So I suggest if you missed that part of the show, you should go back and watch it. If you did watch it, yeah, man. But what I was going to say is, if you did watch it, and that's just not for you, Squirrel Crypto. That's for anybody that might be, agreeing with your position. Not to say I disagree. I'm just saying that for people that might be in that position, to understand that there's a lot more than what we see on the surface, because everything you mentioned is surface. And again, if you're held hostage by somebody pointing a gun at you and they say, give me your wallet, you'll probably capitulate, right? In front of your whole family. And your kids might be mad and say, Dad, you gave away my birthday money. And what are you going to say? Didn't you see that gun in my face? You little brat. So I had to give him my wallet. That's kind of what Trump's dealing with. The only difference is Israel has the gun to our head. Literally. But I appreciate you tapping in, though, bro. I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad at you at all. So the food stamp thing. Speaking of that, I'm also glad you mentioned that, Squirrel Crypto. The food stamp thing. So a judge gave an order saying that Trump's got to release the funding for SNAP for the food stamps. And on the last show, I talked about how cutting off the food stamps would actually benefit everybody in the country, including the former food stamp recipients, because food prices will decline dramatically. What will happen is, because the government has been subsidizing the consumer side of the food industry, which means the people shopping at the grocery stores, it's caused an increase in demand, which caused an increase in prices. When demand goes up, price goes up. That's how it works. And what Trump would have been essentially doing by letting the food stamps get cut off would be removing that consumer side subsidy, which would cause an overstock in groceries, because from what I've heard, there's some grocery stores where 90% of their customer base shop with food stamps. So imagine the fire sale that store would have to have just to make room for the next shipment of groceries that they probably already have on back order. Think about how fast they would have to sell everything just to keep the lights on, because nobody can shop with them with the food stamps. The supply side, the consumer side of that economic equation was artificially inflated by the government with the expansion of the food stamps. So naturally, taking away the food stamps would cause deflation and bring those prices down very quickly. And we talked about that on the last show. But what I did not mention, because I was saving it for tonight, because I did hear that Trump was going along with the food stamp thing, which I don't necessarily agree or disagree with. I'm just reading the board and watching the play. If Trump does decide to, fund the food stamp thing some other way other than through Congress, then that would mean continuing the inflation on the consumer side of the food purchasing, right? Which means for most of us, we'll say, oh my God, he's going to let the inflation keep going. But there is one fix for that. There is another solution to that. And it took some real mathematical thinking, right? The solution is, if you're going to subsidize the consumer side and it causes a rise in prices, the way you bring those prices back down and balance it is to limit the subsidy to the supplies to the consumer side and increase the subsidy to the supply side, right? And how would that happen? By giving the farmers free money? No, by letting them keep their money. So you cut the taxes on the farmers so they can produce more at a lower cost. And that will cause, even with the artificial inflation of the consumer side with the food stamps, the government subsidies, that overproduction of the food, that acceleration in food production, or that increase, I should say, in food production would then still cause an overstock on the supply side. So just like subsidizing the consumer side would raise the prices, subsidizing the supply side would bring the prices down. You see how that works? Think about it. Like most of us, a lot of us, we smoke weed, right? We grew up in the weed era. And we bought weed. Some of us sold weed. We know how the game goes, right? Maybe some of us sold dope. Who knows, right? Whatever. We've all, not all of us, but a lot of us have been in the streets, right? So we kind of know how the game works with the economics. So think about this. Some rich guy moves into town and he says, "Hey, all the weed smokers in town, I give you $100,000 so you get a lifetime supply of weed." So everybody got this money and they're running to the weed man. All the smokers got free money, so they run into the weed man. The weed man's selling out real fast. What's he gonna do? Them dimes are gonna become 20 bags. And 20 bags are gonna become 50 bags, and so on, because people are still spending. So as he raises the prices, people are still buying. So he's making more profit, because they got all this extra money to spend. But let's say the rich guy comes to town, and instead of having a whole bunch of cash to give to the smokers, he's got a whole bunch of pounds to sell at a discounted rate to the sellers. So now you got all these weed dealers across the city getting their bricks at half the price they were getting it before. What's more likely to happen? They'll have more to sell, and the same limited window to sell it, which means they'll have to lower their prices to sell it faster. And they'll have to compete with one another, which will drive down the prices. So them 20 bags become 10 bags. Them 10 sacks become nickel bags. You see? So you subsidize the supply side and you get the price decrease. So based on Trump's decision, Trump's apparent decision, or what seems to be Trump's decision to fund the food stamp program, what do I see happening shortly after he does that? A steep tax cut for the food producers. Some sort of subsidy for the farmers, whether it be new grants for more land, new equipment, whatever, or it be cutting their taxes so they lower their operation costs. That's what I see. Some sort of major subsidy for the farmers, and cutting the taxes would be the most efficient way to do that, because it doesn't amount to the government handing out even more money. And you know what's so crazy about the SNAP benefits? I'm going to tell you right now. And this is why rich people look down their noses at people that receive food stamps. Not a lot of times it's not just because these people are living off of their tax dollars. It's also because they view them as animals. And here's why. And it's not a prejudice thing. It's not a racist thing. It's actually a nature thing. They view them as below them. And here's why. And it's a shitty way to look at the world, but there are people that look at the world this way. That's why there's so many elitist conservatives, because there are elitist conservatives saying, cut off the food stamps, let them starve, blah, blah, blah. I mean, hell, I've said things that sounded like that, but it's not from an elitist standpoint. It's from a capitalist standpoint. Those who deserve to win, let them win, and let the losers lose, right? But there are people out there that maliciously want these food stamp recipients to get cut off and starve and be put in a bad position, because they view them as less than them. And here's why. You ever go to the park and you see those signs up that says, "Don't feed the animals"? Have you ever seen those signs? And if you understand why those signs are there, then you would understand where I'm going with this. But for those of you who don't, let me explain. Those signs in the parks that say don't feed the animals are there to discourage humans from giving food freely to the animals. On the surface, sounds crazy. Why would you not want to feed the animals? We love the animals, right? But here's what happens. When the humans feed the animals begin to lose their ability to forage and fend for themselves and live off of nature like they're meant to. They then become dependent on the handouts from the humans. And what happens as a result of that is they become so dependent on the humans that if the humans stop showing up and stop feeding them, many of those animals will starve to death while living in an environment surrounded by food. They will starve while living in an environment surrounded by opportunity. See where I'm going with that? So the government is the humans and the welfare recipients are the animals. And the humans started feeding the animals, and now the animals are totally dependent on the humans. So if the humans stop showing up, they will literally starve in a world full of food. Because in America, people usually don't starve to death. And in the cases where we see victims starving to death, they're usually children that are tortured and prevented from having food. But as far as fully functioning, able-bodied adults, they tend to get fed one way or another. I mean, we're the one country in the world where the poorest people are the fattest people. That should tell you something. Well, Squirrel Crypto, Trump's dealing with Israel, and those 30 minutes that I told you to reference, that will also explain to you how the money situation is going to work out. Those 30 minutes right there are very crucial. And I said in the beginning of this show, right? I said that in order to effectively understand these discussions, you have to have some sort of prerequisite knowledge. Meaning you have to know things that most people generally don't know in order to understand how the situation is ending up is going the way that it's going. And it's okay if you don't know it. I got plenty of shows over on my Rumble page. So if you like the shit, go check it out. Go check out the other streams. I covered damn near every geopolitical topic you can think of. And I got over 500 videos. So I'm pretty well researched and I know what I'm talking about. So appreciate you, Squirrel Crypto. And listen, man, we might not agree on everything, and I welcome that. I think that's the coolest shit in the world. Because then when I have call-in shows, there'll be a bunch of people that think I'm stupid wanting to call in, and it'll make for some damn good entertainment. Because I most certainly am not stupid. So that knockout punch is gonna hit different. But I welcome it. I welcome it. It's all in good faith, and it's all love. Because at the end of the day, you live in America, you're American, I'm American, and we need America to do well. So we will have a better opportunity to do well for ourselves. That's all it boils down to at the end of the day. And in this unfair system that's controlled at the top through a corporatist structure posing as capitalism, our chances of being able to live well are becoming less and less. And this is the way that we put a stop to it once and for all without any chance of it ever reemerging. So a federal judge in Rhode Island has acknowledged President Donald Trump's quick and definitive response to a court ruling on Friday over supplemental nutrition assistance program benefit payments, describing the president's involvement as greatly appreciated. So it seems like Trump's playing ball. So what's going on here? And speaking of what's going on here, ain't nobody hit the Cash App, man. What's going on there? What's happening? What is happening? I feel slighted. For some strange reason, I feel slighted. But nah, y'all good. Oh, snap. I forgot to look at the Rumble for a while, and Elsine was saying no sound, but I guess you got sound. Maybe you had it on mute. Rumble's got that mute button at the bottom of the video, so look out for that. All right. A footnote in the order acknowledged Trump's involvement, noting the court's recognition of his efforts to facilitate timely funding. The court greatly appreciates the president's quick and definitive response to this court's order and his desire to provide the necessary SNAP funding. U.S. District Court Judge John J. McConnell Jr. wrote in a court order on Saturday. Why it matters. Approximately 42 million Americans, about 1 in 8, rely on food stamps each month, receiving benefits through electronic cards that can be used to purchase groceries. Supporters said that delayed or reduced payments would cause significant harm to households dependent on the program. Right. Those essentially would be the animals that would starve to death in the park if the humans stopped showing up. Now you see the comparison? McConnell ruled that that USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, must now ensure that SNAP benefits for November reach recipients in full by the end of Monday, November 3rd, or that partial payments be issued no later than the end of the day on Wednesday, November 5th. If I had my guess, they're going to draw it out till November 5th and then give people like half their money, or their money, half the money. Let me correct myself. There's no question that the congressionally approved contingency funds must be used now because of the shutdown, the judge wrote. The order cites contingency funds for fiscal year 2024 and 2025, as well as Section 32 of the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1935, as potential sources to ensure SNAP payments are made. USDA has argued that it lacks the legal authority and sufficient funds to provide full SNAP benefits for November amid the ongoing partial government shutdown. Right, because the contingency funds don't add up to the full amount of money they would need to fund everybody. And the president hasn't given the executive order to the USDA to release to tap into the contingency funds. That's why they're saying they don't have the legal authority. But once Trump authorizes them to do it, they'll probably release whatever they have in the contingencies. Everybody gets a partial payment a couple days late, and life goes on. Because remember, the payments are monthly. So once that payment is made, there's a whole nother month left before Congress would actually have to sign off on a continuing resolution to fund the government before a real food stamp shutdown happens. But if the shutdown continues, then the food stamps get shut down. All the contingency funds were used up in a month. Now the judges can order whatever they want to order. There's no money there for that. And food stamps are completely cut. According to administration, shutdown, the agency also contended in court that even if contingency funds were available, they would not cover the full payments, and implementing reduced benefits nationwide would be administratively challenging. According to the administration lawyers, $5.25 billion is currently available in the program's contingency fund, though ensuring full payments for November could require at least $8.5 billion. You see, so they're not going to get their full money. So there will be a reduction if this goes through. There will be the release of the SNAP benefits, but there will be a reduction in that amount of money that's going out, which means a reduction in the consumer side inflation or subsidy. On Friday, McConnell ordered the federal government to fund SNAP benefits using at least the available contingency funds. An appointee of former Barack Obama, he rejected the administration's argument that the funds could only be applied in cases of natural disasters. Well, if that's what the paperwork says, then that's what the paperwork says. Meanwhile, in Boston, U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani, also an Obama appointee, ruled that USDA must continue SNAP payments, describing the program's suspension as unlawful. Of course, it's some foreigner sitting on a fucking bench in the U.S. court telling a United States government agency that they're doing something illegal. No, Judge, you're doing something illegal. But Trump's playing ball. What are people saying? District Court Judge John J. McConnell wrote in court documents, there's no question that the congressionally approved contingency funds must be used now because of the shutdown. In fact, the president during his first term issued guidance indicating that these contingency funds are available if SNAP funds lapse due to a government shutdown. So, although USDA is arguing that it's only used for natural disasters, Trump actually said it could be used in the shutdown. So, Trump has to now stand on business and abide by his word. So, he ain't doing this because the judge said do it. He's actually doing it because he said that's what he would do. He was just letting the clock run out in hopes that Congress would come to a resolution. So that's like somebody telling you sit down as you're sitting down, and then they act like they're the one that made you sit down. No, I was already going to sit down. What the fuck? That's crazy. It's crazy it's crazy when you read these articles and get down to the details, isn't it? I don't want Americans to go hungry, President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social after McConnell's ruling on Friday. I asked the court to clarify how we can legally fund SNAP as soon as possible. If we are given the appropriate legal direction by the court, it will be my honor to provide the funding. California Governor Gavin Newsom said in a statement, I'm proud to see courts agree that the Trump administration has a legal responsibility to support the SNAP program. The USDA needs to release all available funds for this critical program immediately. We are not going to sit idly by while families go hungry. It's cruel. It's immoral, says the guy that burned down half of fucking California. And it's beneath us as a nation. Right, Gavin Newsom. California will keep fighting to make sure people get the food assistance they need and deserve. That is one angry lady. What happens next? USDA must report to the court by noon on November 3rd with a plan to comply. If full payments are not completed, partial payments are to follow by Wednesday. The agency could face further enforcement actions if deadlines are missed. So we'll wait till Monday, wait till tomorrow or later today and see how that plays out. But if I had my guess, they're going to draw it out till Wednesday and then give people partial payments, because if they need 8.5 billion and they only have 5.25 billion, well, the math says partial payments. So my guess says partial payments. But it's going to be followed by tax cuts for the farmers or some sort of subsidy for the farmers and for the food producers. There has to be subsidizing of the supply side if we're going to continue subsidizing the consumer side in order to keep the prices balanced. So we'll see how that goes. Now, this story here is of particular interest to me because it involves the Khazars, it involves the Jews, it involves 1300 AD, and a long history that goes way back. And now that Trump is getting rid of the deep state, and he's at war with the deep state, and patriots worldwide are flushing out the deep state, the Knights Templars are welcomed back to the Vatican. Now, why is this significant? Well, just like the warriors and the patriots of today fight for their countries and the rights of the people in their countries, the Knights Templar were tasked with fighting for the rights of the Christians who had already resided in the Middle East. The Middle East has always had a large Christian population. Christianity didn't come down there with the Europeans. At the time of the Khazarian Empire, the Byzantine Empire to the south of the Khazarian Empire already had a Christian leaning. They were already considered Christians. And they were involved in deposing the Khazars. And once the Khazars were deposed, they fled to parts of Western Europe, Scandinavia, Asia, parts of Africa, and even over to the New World here in the West, to the Americas. But the ones that fled to Europe, and this happened in around 800 AD, the ones that fled to Western Europe reestablished themselves, and by 1300 AD had become the monarchs and the ruling families in those nations, and they still rule those nations to this day. Now, what does Western Europe have to do with the Knights Templar? Well, here's what was going down. The Khazars, being deposed from their kingdom, were spread all over the region, all over the world. And they became the highway robbers. And the highway robbers would target Muslims, they would target Christians, they would target anybody they could traveling along the roads. The same thing they were doing when they had their kingdom. They didn't change. They just changed their clothes, right? And so the Knights Templar were tasked with fighting off these hordes of bandits and protecting travelers. And not only would they protect Christians, but they would also protect Muslims, even though their said task was to protect the Christians. They were protecting everybody that was peaceful. Remember that movie Kingdom of Heaven with Orlando Bloom? And they were in Jerusalem, and the Muslims and the Christians were living together until one sect of Christians decided they wanted to kill the Muslims and take over, and Salah ad-Din had to come kick their ass. But before the Christians got violent, Salah ad-Din was working with them, and they were working with him. So that was kind of the situation with the Knights Templars and the Muslims, and as well as the Christians. And just like there's Muslims being killed today in Africa by other radical Muslims, the same shit was happening back then, and the Knights Templar were an opposing force to that. They were under the command of or the leadership of the Pope at the time. And the Pope was at odds with the King of France. The King of France, who himself was descended from Khazars. And that makes for some interesting history, because it goes back to another religion on religion violation, where the King of France also, interestingly, who was at odds with the Pope and eventually had the Knights Templars disbanded, he also kicked the Jews out of France. Now, there's no record of those Jews being Khazars, but we do know from studying the history of the Khazarian Mafia, when they pose as the Jews and they enter a land with real Jews, they tend to become very hostile towards the real Jews, and they tend to want to remove or eliminate the real Jews and replace them. And the reason for that is because if you're in my country and you look like me and you're posing as my people, but you're not my people will be the first ones to call you out as a fake. So in order to avoid being called out as a fake Jew, they had to kick out the real Jews. But I did a couple of, Google searches to kind of give you guys a general outlook on that entire situation, to shed some light on why the Knights Templar being welcomed back to the Vatican is such a big fucking deal. Because you have to go back to the time when they were kicked out of the Vatican, what happened and what caused them to be kicked out of the Vatican that would make them returning to the Vatican such a significant thing. And this actually means a lot to me, and it should mean a lot to a lot of you guys, because a lot of the Knights Templar were not only white Europeans. They were Middle Eastern men. They were African men. Remember, the Ethiopians were heavy Christians back then too. They still are. In fact, the Ethiopian Bible is one of the first translations of the Bible, of the original Dead Sea Scrolls. So the Knights Templar were men from all over the world, but they had a common cause: maintain order and peace. Now, they didn't always do that, and there were always groups of Templars that got out of line and did some fuck shit and had to be put to death or whatever the case may be. But overall, generally speaking, they were trying their best to be the good guys in the world. And that was because they had a moral compass and they had a religious duty that they were sworn to, that they tried their best to maintain. Like any other organization, eventually the bad people will get in and do bad shit under the flag of that organization. Happens all the time. But going back to the history, it means, what I was saying is the Knights Templar thing means a lot to me, because when these guys were disbanded and they fled from all over Europe, they fled to other parts of the world. A lot of them ended up in Scotland and Portugal and those places, and they settled there and they had families there. And I believe it's my mother's great grandfather, he was a Scotsman. And from what I was able to research on him, because this is all based on what my mom told me and what I could look up online based on the name and the family history, what I came to learn is he was actually a close descendant of one of the Knights Templars that had fled with their group to Scotland. So there is a strong possibility that I could be, by through my mother's bloodline, a blood descendant of a Templar Knight. And I think that's pretty fucking cool if it is true. And a lot of you guys who have family history that goes back to Europe, to medieval Europe, you might be descendants of the Knights Templars, because these guys, when they were Templar Knights, one of their oaths was to never marry or never be with women, like straight celibacy, because they had to be 100% locked in and focused. But once they got disbanded, they started fucking. And they had children, and they had progeny, and they had bloodline. They had bloodlines. And these men spent their whole lives being dedicated warriors. And they were kind of like the rock stars of the day. They were the fly guys of the day. They were the ones that all the women wanted, because they were the ones that traditionally the women couldn't have. So they started fucking, and they had kids. And their kids had their kids. Their kids had kids. Their kids had kids. Their kids had kids. And, well, here we are. So I think that's very, very interesting stuff, because I was very intrigued to know that, one of my great, 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 great grandfathers was Scottish, was a white dude. That's crazy. That is wild. That is fucking wild. But eventually, as the generations go on, they married into Indian families, black families, and, well, here I am. Just a everyday mutt tether. I'm not just a tether, I'm a mutt, apparently. But so let's go back to when the Knights Templar were exiled from the Vatican. The Knights Templar were not exiled from Vatican City, but rather their order was dissolved by the Pope under pressure from King Philip IV of France in 1312. While the Pope officially absolved the Templars of heresy in 1308, the accusations of heresy and immorality extracted under torture by the French crown led to the disbanding of the order, the confiscation of their property, and the persecution of many of their members. You see, so they weren't exactly kicked out, but they were basically ran out. French pressure. King Philip IV of France, who was heavily in debt to the Templars, orchestrated the downfall of the order. Charges and torture. Templar leaders were arrested in 1307 on fabricated charges of heresy and immorality. Many confessed under torture. Pope's role. Pope Clement V, a weak figure who was under French influence, was persuaded to act against the Templars. He officially dissolved the order in 1312. So he came in, Pope Clement came in after Pope Boniface. 1312, but Vatican documents later confirmed he had absolved them of heresy in 1308. Consequences. The order was completely annihilated. Its property was transferred to the Knights Hospitaller, and individual members were forced to join other orders or become outlaws. See, this is how the Illuminati took over. Official exoneration. In 2007, the Vatican officially declared the Templars innocent of heresy based on evidence in the papal archives, stating that the persecution was unjust and a result of political pressure and public scandal. So they were destroyed the same way we see men get destroyed today, through allegations. But back then, there was a lot less regulation on how those allegations were being handled. So who took control of the Vatican in 1300? That's what I wanted to know, because who was behind, who ran all this? So no single person or entity took control of Vatican City in 1300 because the city itself didn't exist as a sovereign state yet. Instead, the papacy, led by Pope Boniface VIII, was in control of the extensive papal states, which included the area where the Vatican is now located. Vatican City as a sovereign entity was not established until the Lateran Treaty in 1929. But the Vatican City still existed, and it was still under the Pope's control. So that's why Excuse me. So that's why the Templar Knights being welcomed back to the Vatican City is so important, because they're being welcomed back to the territory that they once fought and died to protect. Papal control. In 1300, the Pope Boniface VIII was the ruler of the Papal States, which were a collection of territories in Italy, and he proclaimed the first Christian Jubilee. Lateran Treaty. The modern independent Vatican City state was created much later in 1929 through the Lateran Treaty between the Holy See and the Kingdom of Italy. So Pope Boniface. So I looked up Pope Boniface with Satanism to see if he was a Satanist, right? And here's what it said. Pope Boniface VIII was accused of heresy, black magic, idolatry, demonolatry, and sorcery by his political enemies, primarily King Philip IV of France and the noble Colonna family. These were politically motivated charges intended to depose him, and there is no historical evidence that he practiced Satanism. Okay, so let's run with that. Heresy and blasphemy. Simony, selling church offices, a sin for which Dante Alighieri placed him in the 8th circle of hell in his Divine Comedy. I believe that's Dante's Inferno. Demonolatry and keeping a small demon as a pet for advice. Gross immorality, including sodomy, adultery, and incest. Murder of his predecessor, Pope Celestine V, by convincing him to advocate and then imprisoning him, a charge disputed by forensic analysis. Posthumous trial. King Philip IV pressured Boniface's successor, Pope Clement V, to put the dead pope on trial for these crimes. A post-posthumous tribunal was held from 1310 to 1311 to hear the evidence. Conclusion of historians. The tribunal ultimately reached no verdict on Boniface's guilt. Historians generally agree that the charges were part of a malicious campaign of vilification and political propaganda. Sounds like Trump. With the evidence largely stemming from the Pope's personal and political enemies. The rumors and allegations of Satanism or demon worship are considered to be unfounded myths arising from this political conflict, not historical fact. Okay? So, around the time that Pope Boniface was being dragged, even after his death, the Knights Templar were being disbanded. So it seems like Boniface and the Templar Knights were close allies. So a closer look into the conflict with Philip IV of France, the conflict between Boniface and Philip. His most significant conflict was with Philip IV of France, beginning over Philip's desire to tax the French clergy. Now, because the clergy were under the control of the papacy, they were exempt from taxes. But King Philip of France wanted to get the money from the clergy because the clergy were getting money. And Boniface didn't like that. He wanted to stick to the rules, separation of church and state. You don't tax the churches. Boniface the third excommunicated Philip and issued decrees like clerics laicos to prevent the taxation of clergy without papal consent. So the classic case of taxation without representation. The conflict culminated in the attainder and Anagni in 1303, when Philip's troops attacked the Pope, held him for 3 days, and publicly humiliated him. And I'm pretty sure the Templar Knights were not happy about that. So 1303. So 3 years later, in 1306, did King Philip of France destroy the Knights Templar. In 1306, Philip expelled the Jews from France, followed by the total destruction of the Knights Templar in 1307. To further strengthen the monarchy, Philip tried to tax and impose state control over the Catholic Church in France, leading to a violent dispute with Pope Boniface VIII. And the expulsion of the Jews caught my attention, so we'll get to that. So what is King Philip IV of France known for? Philip IV of France, also known as Philip the Fair. See, when you have to call yourself something noble, you're probably not noble. Was known for strengthening royal power by centralizing the government. Yeah, that sounds like some deep state shit. Increasing taxes, Definitely some deep state shit. And asserting control over the church. Is that not what the Democrats are doing right now? His reign was marked, and they're controlled by the Illuminati. His reign was marked by a major conflict with Pope Boniface VIII, which led to the papacy moving to Avignon and the persecution and disillusion of the Knights Templar and the expulsion of the Jewish population. He is also recognized for his role in making France a centralized state, fathering 3 future kings and his patronage of the arts. So he ruled like an Egyptian pharaoh. He wanted to tax everybody, no competition, and any threat of competition must be eliminated. And his expulsion of the Jews around the same time is very interesting because the Knights Templar, they protected real Jews, and they protected Christians, and they protected Muslims as long as they were peaceful. And they always went after the aggressors, who in most cases turned out to be Khazars. This is King Philip's people, the Khazars. So when King Philip was making his move against the Templars and against the papacy so he could tax them because they were getting money and he wanted some of it, the real Jews would have sided with the Templars just like the Templars would have sided with Boniface. So he had to use the power of his military to expel the Jews, the real Jews, who would have called him out as a fake, disband the Templars, and drag Boniface, demonize Boniface. This is typical Khazar playbook. Coup d'etat. Get down or lay down. Pay me taxes or I'm going to put you out of business. And I'm going to put your soldiers out of business too, with my soldiers. So the key accomplishments: centralizing royal power, conflict with the papacy from attempting to tax the church, persecution of the Knights Templar, and expulsion of Jews. To gain wealth, Philip IV accused the Knights Templar of heresy and led a campaign to have the order dissolved, seizing their assets. You see, he wanted the money. It was greed that drove this, because the beef with the Pope started with him wanting to tax the churches. It ended with him basically taking over by force, taxing the churches, disbanding the Templars, and seizing their wealth too. He also expelled the Jews from France in 1306, seizing their property. You see? Hostile takeover. Wars with England and Flanders. He fought wars against England and Flanders, eventually achieving a victory over the Flemish and gaining significant territory and money. Succession and patronage. He had 3 sons who became successive kings of France: Louis X, Philip V, and Charles IV. He also, as a patron of the arts, which helped make France a center of creativity a patron of the arts, which helped make France a center of creativity during the Middle Ages. And the arts and the creativity was kind of like your mainstream media of the day. So he controlled mainstream media. It sounds like exactly what the Khazars are doing today. So did the Templars believe in Jesus? Yes, the original medieval Knights Templars were a devoutly Catholic order that believed in Jesus as the Son of God, which is central to their faith. They were founded in 1119 to protect Christian pilgrims in the Holy Land and were dedicated to defending the Christian faith, which they did for nearly 2 centuries. Now, this is what they record in history, but they protected all the people, because there's historical documents from the Muslims and from real Jews, not the Khazarians, but the actual Jews, of their stories from them claiming that the Knights Templars fought alongside them against invading armies, against marauders and shit like that. So the Templars were just generally the force for good, or at least trying to be. And Pope Boniface was in full support of them. Catholic origins. The Knights Templar were a Latin Catholic military order, and their identity was intrinsically tied to Catholicism, which holds Jesus as the Messiah. Mission. Their founding mission was to serve and protect Christian pilgrims as they traveled to holy sites in the Holy Land. Heresy accusations. Later, during their suppression, they were accused of heresy, which included denying Christians and spitting on the cross. Now, here's the thing. If King Philip IV was so crooked and so greedy that he wanted to get rid of all his competition and take all their money, right? And the Khazars on the roads, the marauders and the bandits were robbing Christians, robbing Jews, and robbing Muslims and taking their wealth and traveling to Europe, many of them going to France with it because France was a big economic hub at the time. It would have benefited the king for these marauders and these street thugs to be, these Khazar thugs to be robbing people on the road because he was getting a piece of that. King Philip IV. So if you have a pope that has great political power and an army called the Knights Templar that was basically inhibiting these road pirates, these Khazars' operations and interrupting their cash flow, that would essentially result in negative cash flow for the King of France, at least from that vertical. So the King of France would then have a vested interest in making up for those losses by taxing the church, by taxing the order. And because they resisted the taxes and were simultaneously cutting off his cash flow by stopping the road pirates from robbing everybody, they had to be stopped. So let's demonize the Pope that supports them with his political power. Let's demonize the Templars who protect who are fucking up my money with their military power, and get them motherfuckers out the way. And then the Jews in France who have wealth and can establish their own order, before they're able to do that, let's get them the fuck out the way. You see the play? It's not hard to figure out. Heresy accusations. Later, during their suppression, they were accused of heresy, which included denying Christ and spitting on the cross. However, some sources say these were confessions made under torture, and some members claimed they were only performed to strengthen their faith. Enduring legacy. Despite the false accusations and disbandment, the Knights Templar are still a symbol of chivalry and religious devotion, and their story continues to inspire fascination. And they definitely fascinate me. So that's pretty much the breakdown of the Knights Templar and what happened to them. Hang on a second, guys. Yeah, and I just thought of something, right? In terms of the fascination aspect. In reading about and understanding how King Philip IV destroyed the Knights Templar and demonized and was able to destroy the good Pope, Pope Boniface VIII, right? The tactics that were utilized sound a lot like what the deep state Khazarian mafia is doing to Trump and the Patriots right now, doesn't it? So it's the same old war being fought all over again. And that brings us to an understanding of why it's so significant that the Knights Templar are being welcomed back to the Vatican. Trump already cleaned out the Vatican. Go watch my streams from 2020 and 2021. I show you all the evidence, all the receipts. It's the same tactics. It's the same war. And because we're the ones that are being targeted by the deep state, this is why I keep losing my channels. We are basically in the position that the Knights Templar were in. We see that we have good political leadership that's trying to do what's right for the people. We see the political machine that wants to extort the people, trying to demonize and depose our political leaders who are not with their bullshit. And in the process of trying to demonize and depose our political leaders, they're targeting the individuals who support these political leaders. It's literally the same fight. And I find it extremely fascinating, because I don't believe in coincidences, that my mother's bloodline possibly descends from a Templar knight. And here I am today in the modern day fighting the same war. And again, which brings me to the significance of the Templar Knights being welcomed back to the Vatican. That means that the deep state that had controlled the Vatican for 700 years has either been totally defeated or partially defeated in that part of the world. And we're still dealing with them over here. So that signifies a significant step in the destruction of the Illuminati control mechanism that took control of the Vatican and took control of Europe and took control of most of the world and handed it to the Khazarian Mafia, or turned it over to the Khazarian Mafia for 700 years. That's what that signifies. So for the people who don't know the history, seeing the Knights Templar being welcomed back to the Vatican, let me go back to that slide. Seeing the Knights Templar being welcomed back to the Vatican, it just looks like some more ceremonial bullshit. But if you know the history, you see how deep it is, and you get the message being sent. The message being sent is patriots in control. The deep state, the dark side, the Illuminati, they're losing. They're losing because they no longer have control. And the Vatican is one of the major deep state hubs in the world for control of the money, control of the wealth, control of the human trafficking operations, etc. And they've been conquered by patriots. The patriots have won. It might not seem like it because we still got enemy factions running around that need to be mopped up. But in light of everything else that Trump is doing right now, and his administration, his cabinet members moving into military bases and going under military protection, means something big is about to take place here in America. But the big event has already taken place at the Vatican. The Knights Templar have returned because the forces that forced them out, that forced their predecessors out, have been defeated. So I thought that Templar Knights scenario, that situation there, was extremely interesting. It always piques my interest when I hear anything pertaining to that particular order. And they say that the Knights Templar don't exist anymore and didn't exist. They always existed, but they had to hide who they were. They had to hide who they were because they were being hunted all over the world by the Khazarians. Remember, the Khazarian Mafia had already taken over, or had already established themselves all over the world. So wherever these Templar Knights fled to, they could not reveal that they were actual Templar Knights, except amongst themselves within their own families. And that kind of became their family secret. And it was encoded in their family crests. And because the Knights Templar were under the papacy, their family crests were shields. They were shields because they didn't have, some family crests are in the shape of banners. It looks like a rolled out banner. Others look like a shield. The family crests that are shaped like banners means that your family is of royal blood, directly descendant from royalty. But the majority, and you find very few family crests that look like that. So if you have a family crest that looks like that, you are connected to a royal family by blood. If your family crest is in the shape of a shield, that means your family served under some political order, such as a monarchy, or it could have been the papacy. Based on the symbols within that shield would tell you which one was which. But the shield means you became a member through initiation. Your family became incorporated into that order by initiation, and whatever order it is would be encoded in the symbolism, whether it's horses or swords or helmets or whatever it is that's pictured on your family crest shield. My family crest is a shield. On my dad's side. On my mom's side, family crest is a shield, and it has Templar coating. It has the Templar cross on it. And by Templar cross, it has that on it. And that's on my mother's side, who just so happens to have a great-great-great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, I think it is, that came, or it could be her great-grandfather. I'm not even sure. But he came from Scotland, and he had a lot of money and a lot of wealth, and he bought a lot of land. So let's talk about him expelling the Jews, because that was mentioned in the Templar story. But now that we got the full rundown on the Templars and what happened to them, let's look at what happened to the Jews in France and see if my deduction is right. King Philip was a Khazar, and the Jews he expelled from France were the real Jews who posed a political threat to him. King Philip IV of France expelled Jews from his kingdom in 1306, primarily for financial gain, as he confiscated their property and wealth to pay off debts from war. Other contributing factors included his view of them as a threat to royal authority and a desire to consolidate power. While a financial windfall, this act ultimately hurt the kingdom's long-term financial health. I believe so, T. Wriggles. I believe so. I believe so. I looked up the family crest of my mother's ancestor who came from Scotland, and his family crest has the Templar cross on it. And it was encoded in symbolism because they couldn't outright say it. They couldn't announce themselves as it. And this is why a lot of family crests are hard to find, because for the Templars especially, they had to hide their family crests. So in being able to find and identify that family crest, it's very significant. And what became of these Templars when they fled to Europe, especially when they fled from France and they fled from the Vatican, and the ones that went into Europe, they went to hostile nations nations that were hostile to France. And because they were trained warriors, many of them got a chance to serve under those kings. And I believe it was King John, the King of Scotland at the time, who accepted the Templars that were fleeing from the Vatican, or from the Papal States, I should say. So, financial motivations for kicking out the Jews. War debts. King Philip IV was in a precarious financial position after years of warfare, particularly with the Flemish. Expelling the Jews and seizing their assets was a direct way to raise immediate funds. Yeah. I said that earlier, T. Wriggles. I don't know if you were here for that, but I when I was talking about when the Templars fled, they fled. They basically fled Europe. Some stayed and served under kings that were hostile to France, but the majority of them fled Europe. A lot of them ended up in Africa, and a lot of them ended up in the Americas, because in the Americas, none of that papacy, none of that king shit was going on over here, except for the King of England, who had just not too long ago, the English monarchy had fought a war with the French, so they were hostile to the French, thus serving under a king that was hostile to the French. And not only that, but a lot of the American founding fathers are descendants of the Templars, were descendants of the settlers who came to the United States of America. Well, not the United States, but came to North America while it was under the King of England's control. And their descendants were the ones that fought the King of England in 1776, because by the time 1776 rolled around, it had been 400 years, and the Khazars had infiltrated and taken over England as well. Because remember, the French fought a war. The Khazars from the base of France, from the French monarchy, fought a war against England to try to take over England. They lost that war. So because they lost that war, they had to infiltrate and take over politically. So they did that. The same way they try to infiltrate America, or they try to take over America. America fought a war against them. They lost, so they came back and took over politically. So it's literally the same playbook from back then to the founding of America, even to the modern day. It's the same playbook, so I have to assume it's the same people. Confiscation of property. Philip ordered the confiscation of Jewish goods, homes, and synagogues, effectively taking their property and the money owed to them by others. Seizure of debts. He declared himself the creditor of all debts owed to the Jewish community, seizing the money that was owed to them by Christians. You see, so he didn't care about Christian, Jew, nothing. All he wanted was the money. Give me the money, motherfucker. I don't care who you are. You got the money, I need it. I'm taking it. So he was a strong arm motherfucker. Political motivations. Consolidation of power. The expulsion was a way for Philip to assert royal authority and eliminate a group that was seen as an independent state within a state. And that's where the Khazars, from the real Jews, the Khazars learned how to operate like that and infiltrate and take over. Because the real Jews had their state within the state of France, but they weren't trying to take over France. They just had the power, the wealth. They had the wealth, the influence, and the organization to be able to do it if they were to choose to do it. Thus, they were seen as a threat. Though they had no interest in doing it, because they had the ability to do it, they had to be eliminated. Eliminating a rival financial source. Sounds about Khazarian. In the short term, confiscating Jewish property and wealth was profitable, but it all hear me? Y'all hear me all right? Mic check, mic check. What in the hell? Can y'all hear me? All right, I think you guys can hear me. So my freaking computer just died on me. I had it plugged in the whole time, but it wasn't charging. I don't get it. My damn computer died. So we're gonna fire it back up. We're gonna get back to work. You guys okay with that? Y'all cool with that? Are y'all cool with that or what? Where is my live chat? Where is my chat? I can't see the chat from my phone. Nope, that ain't it. There it is. All right. Yeah, we're I got my computer back on, so we're going back live. That's crazy. My shit just died. That was wild. That was wild. All right. Should be back soon. All right. I just entered the studio as me again. All right. Give me a second. I got to mute up. All right. I should be back. You guys should be able to hear me better now. Can y'all hear me? All right. I should. All right. We're back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. All is not lost. Citizen man lives, I tell you. Citizen man lives. All right, so let's get back to it. Let's get back to it. Share screen. Oh, my gallery. I got to open up my gallery. Dang it. Make sure I still got my slides. Oh, come on. I lost my slides, y'all. That's crazy. Hold on. We're going to get this right. I still got my slides. I just got to reopen them in the gallery. That's all. Gallery closed when the computer shut down. That was crazy. I don't even remember what I was saying. Y'all remember what I was saying? Because somebody put in the chat what it was that I was saying when the computer died, because that just kind of completely threw me off. But if I can get a refresher, that would definitely help. If somebody could put in the chat which section I was on, that would be awesome. Okay. Now let's do the screen share, see what we get. All right. Don't need audio. Share. We should be back, y'all. Is it back up or what? Are we good money? We good money? All right. Cool. Iron FE says political motivations. Where would that be? Consolidation of power. The expulsion away for Philip. Hold on, mic check, mic check. Consolidate. Away for Philip to assert royal authority and eliminate a group that was seen as an independent state within it. Right. That's what I was saying. So the real Jews in France, they had their own wealth. They had their own little society. They had their own economy going. They were getting money. and they posed a political threat to the king. If they decided one day that they wanted to overthrow the king, they would have the ability to do it. So the king had to get rid of them. And eliminating the financial source eliminated investment. So we got to that. Religious and social factors. While the main driver was financial, religious and social prejudices played a role, and the expulsion was a manifestation of growing anti-Semitism in medieval Europe. And the anti-Semitism was coming from the Khazars, what the Khazars were doing under the banner of being Jews. So people started to just hate the Jews. Isn't that the same thing that's happening now? It's the Khazars running the media. It's the Khazars running Israel. It's the Khazars running the banking system. But people keep saying the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. They're not Jews. They're Khazars. The short-term and long-term impact. The short-term and long-term impact. Short-term gain. In the short term, the act was a success, providing the king with a substantial amount of money. Long-term loss. In the long term, the expulsion damaged France's economy by eliminating a significant source of wealth, trade, and investment. So, essentially, the king kicked out the Jews, which was a huge financial power, and he fucked the country. He fucked the kingdom. And the Knights Templar would have overthrown him had they known what he was really up to, and they were probably planning to do so with Pope Boniface VIII. This is why King Philip had to get rid of Boniface and the Templars around the same time. And the political structure that King Philip IV helped establish across Europe is what has now been deposed. Hence, the military order that was disbanded by the king, that probably posed the biggest threat to the Khazar rulership, is now welcome back to the Vatican. And they're back to the Vatican to take over. Because after they were kicked out of the Vatican, they brought in the Jesuits and they brought in the Knights of Malta. And those organizations had already been infiltrated and controlled by the Illuminati. And remember in the portion that I read where the Knights Templars, after they were disbanded, some of them were forced to join other orders. Those orders included the Jesuit order and the Jesuit order and the Knights of Malta. And they were other orders as well that were not as popular. And what's funny, right, is Trump went to, I think it was Pennsylvania School of Business. He went to this business school he went to is a Jesuit school controlled by the Jesuit order. And if the Templar Knights, some of the Templar Knights were forced to join the Jesuits, that means that they are descendants of Templar Knights that are amongst the Jesuits, posing as Jesuits, but they descend from Templars. So essentially, they would rise to power and oppose the order that the Jesuits follow. Sounds like Trump, doesn't it? This is very interesting stuff, and the Knights Templar are a very interesting group. And the Khazarian king, Philip IV, had a huge problem with them. Let me see something. Let me look up Philip IV of France. Khazarian. Let's see what that says. There's no historical evidence or record connecting Philip IV of France to the Khazars. He was the king of France and Narav from 1285 to 1314, and his lineage was Frankish, though his father Philip III, a member of the House of Capet, through his father Philip III. His reign was marked by struggles with the papacy, wars with England and Flanders, and the persecution of the Knights Templar, and the expulsion of the Jews from France. Okay, So he was, they said no record or evidence connecting him to the Khazars, right? So his lineage was Frankish. So he was a native Frank. So let me see something else here. That's what Google said. Let me see what DuckDuckGo says, because there's been times I searched shit on Google and then DuckDuckGo gave me a completely different answer. King Philip IV of France. Khazar. Let's see what DuckDuckGo says. By virtue of Joan. So King Philip IV, called Philip the Fair, was king of France from 1285 to 1314 by virtue of his marriage with Joan the First of Navarre. He was also known as King of Navarre and Count of Champagne as Philip the First from 1284 to 1305, although Philip was known to be handsome. Hence the epithet Le Bel. His rigid, autocratic, imposing, and inflexible personality gained him other nicknames, such as the Iron King. How are you the Iron King and the Fair at the same time? So he's claiming, so they're saying historically he's from France. He's a Frenchman, a native Frenchman. Joan of Navarre. Let me see where Navarre is on the map. N-A-R-A, or Navarre. Am I saying that? Navarre, N-A-V-A-R-R-E. Let me look that up real quick. Navarre, France map. Let me see where that's located. So the Navarre territory in France is just in the south of France, right into Spain. So it's right, damn near right on the border of Spain and France. Right? Let me see something. What year did Khazars flee to France and Spain? Let me see what I could find. So I'm searching, what year did the Khazars flee to France and Spain? See if I could find anything. The Khazars were a semi-nomadic Turkic-speaking people, become major Middle Empire in the Caucasus, blah, 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 blah. Okay, the mysterious Khazar Empire. I don't see anything about them. Khazars, early European history and religion. Very interesting. Because I specifically remember on that piece that I read about the Khazarian Mafia, they fled to Europe and they infiltrated the royal families. And you notice in King Philip's story, he became a king because he married a princess. And he became a king because I guess that princess's father didn't have a male heir. So whoever his daughter married became the king. So he married his way into royalty, into the monarchy. That sounds like some Khazarian shit too, because he didn't descend from monarchy. Well, let me correct that. He was Philip IV. So he did descend from monarchy, but he didn't have as much power as he had until he got married. T. Wriggle says, Citizen Man, I thought the Black Mantles used to be the cleanup crew for the Templars, then joined the Jesuits. Well, that's pretty that's pretty interesting, because that would actually be supported or be confirmation of what that excerpt said when we read about the Jesuits, the Templars being forced to join other secret societies or other orders, the Jesuits being one of them. So what you said there about the black mantles seems to fit the narrative. So I appreciate that piece of info. That's actually pretty interesting to know, because I did not know that. I didn't even know about the black mantles. But all in all, the royal bloodlines that started in Egypt created the Illuminati, because they'll tell you the Illuminati didn't start till 1776. That's bullshit. The Illuminati existed since the Egyptian pharaohs. And the monarchies that were born from the first royal families of Egypt, they inspired other people, other families, and other nations to take over and rule through monarchy rather than communalism. And thus, these royal bloodlines were created, and the Khazars seem to be the ones that perfected it. This rule with an iron fist, with this, no morality, no, the Illuminati shit. Do as thou wilt kind of shit. And that do as thou wilt motherfuckers got shut down by the Byzantines and the Russians. And then they fled to Europe, reestablished themselves. And then they were about to get shut down by the papacy and the Knights Templar and the other groups affiliated with them. So they shut them down. So, the French monarchy, King Philip IV, shut them down. And they have ruled that region of the world for 700 years. Now the Templars are back at the Vatican, which means their 700-year rule is over. Isn't there something in prophecy that said, in biblical prophecy, that mentions 700 years specifically? Is there? Let me see something. Biblical prophecy regarding, I should be doing this on the computer, regarding 700 years. The most prominent biblical prophecy involving 700 years is found in the book of Isaiah, which foretold details about the birth and suffering of the Messiah, Jesus, approximately 700 years before his arrival. Key examples include the virgin birth, Isaiah 7:14, which was fulfilled with Jesus' birth, in Isaiah 53, which describes the suffering servant who would be wounded for humanity's transgressions and buried in a rich man's tomb. So the 700-year span that's mentioned in the Bible would be the time frame between the prophecy of the birth of Jesus and the actual birth of Jesus. 700 years. And now we have another significant 700-year event where the Knights Templar, who were devout servants of Jesus, being disbanded and now being able to reform and return back to the papacy that they were banished from, essentially. 700 years. Almost sounds to me like this was pre-planned. But, who knows? I just find it very interesting that there's some congruency there. Maybe I'm reaching, but there's definitely some congruency. But all this signifies something major to me. Something major is going to happen here in the United States, and we have to brace ourselves for it, because whatever it is that's going to happen, law enforcement and the military are super active. There's a lot of important people going to jail, and a lot more important people are under threat. So we have to take that as a warning sign that we're under threat. And whatever it is that the Trump administration is about to do, the best that I can tell you on what it could possibly be is it pertains to the Charlie Kirk assassination. And if Kash Patel and the FBI and the Trump administration are actually investigating the Charlie Kirk assassination and basically looking down the rabbit holes that we know they should look down, they have their sights set on a specific group of people who are experts at playing victim and have a lot of control in this country. And I believe that the Charlie Kirk assassination, and again, I use that term loosely, the Charlie Kirk assassination was basically, like I said, the trigger event to set the wheels in motion to sick the dog, the long arm of the law, on the Khazarian Mafia infiltration. And you got Tulsi Gabbard and her people trying to cover up for the Khazarian Mafia who orchestrated Charlie Kirk's assassination. And it's no surprise, it should come as no surprise that the Egyptian military had something to do with that plane that took off 20 minutes after the shooting and returned back an hour later and turned off their transponder during the flight. Egyptian intelligence. And if, again, you look at the relationship between Egypt and Israel, they are not friends. Egypt and Israel are not friends. Shout out to my man Keith on the Cash App. He says for financial support for the show. Appreciate you, Keith. I wish more people would be inspired by you. That means we got 2 supporters for the show tonight, and I've been live for 3 hours, y'all. That's crazy. Y'all got to show some love, man. Y'all should show some love. Put $1 in the pot, man. Don't make me be like a Baptist minister and start selling your dreams. I'm not here to sell your dreams or sell your hope. I'm here to tell you that shit's going down, and what's going down is going to be major, and it's going to affect us all in some way. And by affect us all, I have to say the initial effects may be adverse, but in the long term, it will be very beneficial. That's all I can say. And the benefit will come from permanently dismantling this entire system that's been extorting us, oppressing us, robbing us, dumbing us down, stealing our souls, corrupting our children, enslaving us. At the end of it all, excuse me, the end game is a free and fair world. Not equality like the dumbass communists tell you. There will never be equality. Because although all men are created equal, all men don't operate equally. All men don't think equally. We all have a brain, but not all of our brains work. So yes, we're all created equal in the sense that we all have a brain, but we're not equal. We were created equal, but we're not equal. So there will never be equality. The only thing we can hope for is fairness. Because fairness puts the people who deserve to be at the top by merit at the top, and the people who deserve to be at the bottom by merit at the bottom. Because when they preach equality, what they mean by equality is putting the people who should be at the bottom at the top. Look at your Democratic Party. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was a fucking bartender. That means there's a very high possibility that she sold pussy. No offense to bartenders, but in an expensive ass city like New York, it's very tempting. And if the right baller came through and offered you $5,000 for some head, you know, Alexander, I could see AOC doing that shit. Faux show. But this is why the Democratic Party and the political establishment seems to be upside down, because they've used this equality shit to put scumbags in power who should actually be on the corner shaking a cup or in prison with nobody coming to put money on their books. That's where they belong. That's where they should be. But yet they're making millions of dollars at the height of their political careers. They're famous thanks to equality. Look at Ketanji Brown Jackson. That's equality. We need a black woman in there, so let's just put any black woman in there. One that protects pedophiles and don't know what a woman is. Yes, perfect. But you know what fairness is? Fairness is, let's put somebody qualified in there. And if we all agree that we should put a black woman in there, let's look for a qualified black woman. That's fairness. DEI is equality, is what they mean by equality. Merit-based is fairness. Barnes says, who'd buy that? In reference to AOC. Well, Angry Man was doing a stream one time, and he was talking about AOC, and he was pointing out that she is weird looking. She is not, when it comes to Latino women, there's two types. They're the extremely beautiful and then the weird looking. AOC falls under the weird looking category. And he was saying, any of you guys out there that think she's cute, something's wrong with you. And they were grown men in Angry Man's chat saying that she's pretty, and they would do it. And I'm pretty sure from among that small group, there's an even smaller group that would buy it. Don't put nothing past these nasty ass, perverted ass men, Barnes. Don't put nothing past them. Don't put nothing past no man. Because we all know there's way too many men out there that think with their dicks, and well, if she can make it stand up, she can get in their money. Right. Bad taste. Bad taste. You can't buy taste, man, but you sure can buy some pussy. Apparently. But anyway, I don't know how we got from the Knights Templar to selling pussy, but nevertheless, something big is happening. I almost want to say something wicked this way comes. But the EBT crisis may possibly be averted, so that's not a worry, or that shouldn't be a worry anymore. But the Trump officials going under military protection, that is a that's a very strong indicator that something's coming down the pipe. And I believe it stems from Kash Patel's investigation into the Charlie Kirk assassination, and it will result in a complete severing of ties from Israel, which will then greenlight all the hostile nations that Israel has been attacking to then retaliate without any fear of the United States intervening. Because Europe can't afford to intervene. They done flooded all their countries with illegals and shit, and they're broke. They're fucked up. And their military ain't worth a shit. And if China says we're backing the nations that are attacking Israel, Europe ain't going to challenge China, because then they'll have to deal with Russia. And if Russia says we're backing the nations that are attacking Israel, or if Russia attacks Israel, the U.S. is not going to intervene. But all ties here at home have to be severed, which means their system of control and their network of infiltrators have to be flushed out. From the sleeper cells on the street ready to commit mass casualty events to their political operatives like Tulsi Gabbard and Joe Kent, who are trying to disrupt Kash Patel's investigation. And they could only be trying to disrupt it for one reason and one reason only. That is to undermine it. Shout out to my brother Arthur for the Cash App. He says, for keeping us woke. Appreciate you, Arthur. So that's 3 supporters. We need 7 more. We need 7 more. I'll go till 3.5 hours. We've been on 3 hours and 7 minutes. I'll go another half an hour, but that's all I got for y'all, man. I'm running out of moves here. T. Wriggle says, Citizen Man, what do you think about everyone walking out when Netanyahu was speaking at the UN? That was a show of solidarity from the rest of the world that if given the opportunity, we will fuck you up. We will come together and put all our differences aside and agree on fucking you up. That's what that means. But they're not moving because Trump has to greenlight it, and Trump hasn't greenlit it yet because he hasn't denounced Israel yet openly. J.D. Vance has openly denounced the whole kissing of the wall. But Trump himself has not given the order to shut down all Israel operations. And if I had my guess, the severing ties with Israel, I think some high-level operatives are going to be arrested from the Kash Patel investigation before the 2026 midterm. But the 2026 midterm will be the defining moment when AIPAC gets ousted. The AIPAC-controlled politicians are going to get themselves removed, except for the only ones that are going to get to stay are the ones that got AIPAC money but are not kissing Israel's ass, because the ones that got the AIPAC money, they are also under threat. So you'll take this money, you'll do the job. But if you don't do the job, we're not going to take the money. We're going to take your life. That's called selling your soul. But if the shooters that are threatening to take their lives are no longer operational because Trump had the military go out and mop them all up from these cities, then guess what? AIPAC has no control because they don't got no killers behind them no more. So all that money they dole out to those politicians, they have no way to enforce their will because they don't have the killers that traditionally have been the enforcers of their will. So the killers got to be gotten rid of. And if it's the same group of killers that allegedly or plotted Charlie Kirk's assassination, then Kash Patel has them in the crosshairs. And he's going to have everything he needs to put them all away. And once they all get put away, we'll have the killers who help enforce AIPAC's will, once they pay out the money, no longer operational. So they'll be safe. We now have clean, free, and fair elections. So there'll be no more election fraud. And the people's will actually be realized, because when they elect their representatives, whether they took AIPAC money or not, AIPAC would no longer have the strength or the power or the force to control them. So they will actually be able to represent the interest of the people. So from 2026 to 2028, I believe, is when between now and the 2026 midterm is when it's all going to go down. But between 2026 and 2028 is when it's all going to be revealed, and we will see the results that we've been wanting to see. That's how I believe it's going to go down. Now, I could be wrong, but usually when I make these predictions, I'm right. Barnes says several Halloween attack plots were broken up over the weekend. Yeah, I heard about that, Barnes. I heard about that. And it was the feds breaking them up, not the local authorities. Because the local authorities, based on that slide I showed you guys earlier, that happened in Mississippi, well, they're too busy protecting Antifa and dealing drugs. Hence, military is the only way. Hence, military protection for the Trump administration officials, as the Trump administration drops the hammer on the most deadly infiltration force the world has ever seen, Israel. Bada bing, bada boom. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're at 3 hours and 12 minutes. I don't know if I got another 18 minutes in me to go. So I'm going to have to close it out here, but I do appreciate the support. Don't forget, subscribe to the Citizen Man Backup channel on YouTube. Follow me on Rumble. Help build the Rumble page, man. It's very important that you guys help me build the Rumble page because YouTube is so shaky and so finicky. They love flagging streams down. All right. They love flagging down streams. And I've lost 15 channels. This is my 16th YouTube channel. The Citizen Man Backup channel would be my 17th if I were to lose Citizen Man TV, God forbid. But Rumble is where you'll find the bulk of my content, over 500 videos of great information. So if you are impressed with the research and the information that you guys got from me tonight, you will be even more impressed if you go explore my Rumble page. And hopefully you'll be so impressed that you create a free Rumble account. Only takes a few minutes. All you need is an email address and a screen name, and you will create a screen name, and you will have access to comment on Rumble, thumbs up the videos, share the videos, and even create your own content. So follow me over on Rumble and check out those other 500 videos. Also, last but not least, I do appreciate you guys supporting the show. And for those of you who would like to support the show, but have not decided to yet because you weren't sure if I was worth supporting, well, if you ever do come to that decision and decide that, hey, you know what, Citizen Man's worth $1, so what the fuck? You can support the show by sending in a kind donation via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo by using the tags scrolling across the screen in the banner below, the links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow. Just click the yellow, the box opens up, all the links are there, and you can also find those very same links in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. All right? And of course, let me say this, the red X to the PayPal logo is just there to remind you that PayPal censors comments. So be mindful of what you say in the comments, because if they flag your comment, they'll freeze your account and mine, steal our money, and then demand to know how many hairs we have on our testicles before they give us our money back. So in order to avoid that, I suggest PayPal comments, keep them surface level. All right. And I want to give a big shout out to my supporters for tonight. Shout out to my brother Arthur, says for keeping us woke. Shout out to my brother Keith. He says financial support for the show. Shout out to my sister. Shout out to my sister Joy for that support post last show. Shout out to my sister Elsine for supporting me so much. Elsine has been a big supporter of mine. I really appreciate that sister for her support. And of course, big shout out to my good brother Lee 14224 on the PayPal. He says, "What you mean my ABT ain't taken? Run it again. I see what you did there, Lee. I didn't catch it the first time. I see it now. Run it again. Have a great Sunday show. Appreciate you, brother Lee. I see what you did there. I didn't catch it the first time, but I caught it this time. I guess I had to warm my brain up for 3 hours and then revisit it. But anyway, guys, I appreciate the love. I appreciate the support. Let me check the Venmo, because sometimes Venmo, get a Venmo donation, but they don't notify me. So I'm going to open the Venmo app, because when that happens, when I open the app, they then notify me. Okay, so no notification because there's no Venmos. Cool. So we got 3 supporters on the board for tonight. If we can get 2 more supporters, make it 5. Can y'all do that for your boy? I'd like to get 10 ideally, but perhaps with the numbers of viewers, the viewer number being so low, I don't know if it's shadow banning or just my own inconsistency, but I'll try to be more consistent now that we're getting into the slow season. But if you guys want more shows, you got to put up more dough, man. You know what I'm saying? Otherwise, I got to find something else to do to feed my family. So if y'all want more of the Citizen Man, I need you to help me bring him back to the stage. If you know what song that's from, you're a true hip hop head. But anyway, so we got 3 on the board. I don't know if we'll get 2 more. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I'm not sure. But I would like to thank you in advance if you watch this on the replay and you decide to hit the Cash App and support the show. I thank you. I appreciate you, and I will shout you out on the next show. The next show, I'm really working hard to get back to the consistency. So, because I notice like when I do these back-to-back shows, the numbers tend to creep up every time, like little by little. So the more shows and the more consistent I can be, is I know the bigger my numbers can grow. Because when my channel was at its height, I was streaming consistently 5 nights a week. Sunday, then I would skip Mondays, and I'll do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then I'd skip Saturday, restart Sunday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 5 nights a week, and the channel blew up. So I think if I start doing that, or doing some more consistent shows, maybe more daytime shows, because I barely ever do the daytime shows. But now that I'll be home during the day more, during the day more, I'll be able to do that. And I think that will be very, very helpful to the growth of the channel. Then I can transfer the daytime crowd to the nighttime show, so you guys can have more friends. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for being here. I do appreciate the love. I do appreciate the support. You guys are amazing, as always. And I hope you guys enjoyed the content. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you continue doing more research on your own, and trust but verify, right? Because you guys know I do thorough research, and you guys trust my research because I've proven myself to be credible. But I still encourage you to verify what it is that I'm telling you. The information that I'm giving you, I implore you to verify it. So that way, if you have to vouch for me, or you decide to vouch for me in any situation, you will have the ammunition, the knowledge, and the information that even goes further than what I've given you, which shows that you're actually dedicated to understanding and doing the research, and you're not just parroting what you heard. You feel what I'm saying? Because anybody could say, fuck what you heard. You know what I mean? Shout out to my sister Paula. My sister Paula hit the Cash App. She says, always on point. Thank you. Appreciate that, Paula. We're at 4. We're up to 4. And we got 10 minutes till 3.5 hours. We're at 3 hours and 20 minutes. So we got 10 minutes to get one more on the board, and I can go and I can sleep happy. I can sleep well tonight. I can return to my family and say, hey, family, we can eat today. They cut our food stamps off, but they hit the Cash App, even though we're not even on food stamps. Kids will be like, food stamps? We ain't on no food stamps. What the fuck you talking about, Dad? But I appreciate you guys, man. I'm itching to get out of here, but I'm trying to be patient because I would like to see one more person on the board. Plus, the more people I shout out is the cooler I look. Y'all don't want me to look cool? Y'all want me to look corny? Y'all want me to look lame? Like, oh, he's lame. Don't nobody donate to him. He's lame. He don't be talking about shit. He don't be talking about nothing. He don't get no money. Motherfucker lame. That's how the world works, unfortunately. But then when they hear me shouting out all these Cash Apps, they're like, ooh, what's he talking about? It must be worth something. And then they show up. But anyway, I guess 4 is what we'll have to settle for. That's cool. Let me check Rumble. I keep forgetting to check Rumble because there's always the occasional Rumble rant. I don't see any Rumble rants. So, yep, we're going to shut it down at 4. I only had 1 minute of wait time left in me. But again, anybody that supports the show after the show, I'll shout you out on the next show. I promise. I won't forget. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the love. I appreciate the support. And anybody that hears my cries in the dark for a 5th supporter, we got 4 on the board. Oh, shit. Look at that. I was just about to give up. Look at that. My brother Tyrone hit the Cash App. T Wriggles, my man T Wriggles hit the Cash App. Appreciate you, T Wriggles. What took you so long, man? What took you so long? I know what took you so long. You didn't want me to go. That's what it was. Like, wait, don't go. I got you, bro. But, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we've gotten 5 on the board. So, we failed, but we didn't fail that bad. 50% is better than 0%. So I appreciate the support, man. You guys are awesome. I think maybe I might have to play it a little more modestly and just, ask for 5 supporters rather than 10. And then once we hit 5, then we'll up it to 10. Maybe that's a better route, since, you know, I'm not pulling the numbers of viewers that I used to pull. So maybe 10 might be pushing it a little too far. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. You guys are the greatest. Y'all the best audience on YouTube. And I hope that, you know, y'all can let the world know that I'm the best researcher on YouTube when it comes to certain shit. And, you know, spread the word, share the stream. You know what I'm saying? I'm not nearly as vulgar as I used to be. So that's good. You can now share it with your grandmother and her church friends, you know, and just let them know, hey, it's rated R. So there's the occasional cuss word or racial epithet. But other than that, you know, when he comes across a BBC article, he does not call them the big black cock news network, right? And he doesn't call CNN the cunt news network. Like, he doesn't do that. You know, he's a pretty straightforward guy. He's fair, you know, and he's got good info. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the love, appreciate the support. See you on the next one, and I bid you adieu. Citizen Man, out.